Audio. Here we go. Let's go live. Let's see here. I need to push a few buttons. Push that button. Push this button. All the buttons are pushed. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Blue Marble Science on a lovely Thursday afternoon. 28th day of July, 2022. Joined by Farmer's Boy Judy Bassett, Conwood George, I should say, and others to come, I'm quite sure. What's everybody up to?
Oh, just chillaxing. We've nearly made it to Friday.
There you go. There you go.
Well, prior to your going live, we were just having a little brief discussion concerning Bev's live show, but with I can science that, but maybe that's what you want to talk about. I don't know, but I'll stay in the background and listen here.
No, that's going on live at the moment, and it's sort of what prompted me to I wasn't really planning on doing a stream today, but I thought, what the hell?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Let's get on and talk about water levels, what the hell they are, what they do, what they're used for, from people that have had some experience using these things in the real world.
Well, I've built several myself.
Yeah.
I used to use for surveying the boundaries and areas in my 1 acre property on the lake before I bought an auto level or a theodolite. Water level works quite well. But the thing is a common misconception. Well, I wouldn't say common. The misconception Bev and his crew have, of course, is their claim is that a water level was established to establish a horizontal plane. That's bullshit. Water level was first developed and used for finding points of equal elevation. Had nothing to do with horizontals or finding horizontal planes. Later, you can use a water level to establish approximately a local horizontal plane of reference. It's never ever going to be as accurate as what you would get with, say, an auto level or a theodolite, surveying theodolite, because when you connect the ends of a water level with a straight line, that straight line is always going to be tilted a little bit downward away from the horizontal line of reference, or that's established, say, by what you'd get with an auto level, always going to be tilted downward. And that tilt downward gets less and less as you bring the two ends together. So locally, you might get a pretty good idea of where your local horizontal is, but as say if the ends were separated by a mile, then the far end is going to be 8 inches below the horizontal reference, and you will be off by around I think it's around 2 arc seconds or something like that. The straight line connecting the two ends would be tilted downward from the horizontal, and it'll be more and more as you separate the ends. But as you bring the ends together, that tilt gets less and less, and you can get an approximately good idea of where your horizontal is, but it's never ever going to be precise or as good as with an auto level. So in short, a water level is used for establishing points of equal elevation.
Right.
That was its use.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A water level is going to show you points of equal gravitational potential. I don't want, if you say too many words to these guys, they vapor lock on you. But that is, in fact, what it's establishing.
Yeah,
yes, you can draw an imaginary line connecting the two ends of the water level, and call that a horizontal line. I object to the use of the term horizontal plane of reference, because a line you can't establish a plane with 2 points.
True, you'd have to swing just like an auto level can't establish. Just looking out in one direction, establishes a horizontal line, but as you swing it or rotate the base, then you can get a horizontal plane. You'd have to do the same thing with your water level. You'd have to swing one end around to get your plane. Otherwise, if it's just in one fixed position, of course, you're just establishing a horizontal or straight line between the ends, which is approximately horizontal if the ends are close enough together.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Well, hello, Davros. How are you? And I
Well,
see-
it is Friday.
Oh, yeah. Somewhere it is.
Yeah,
Right
not here,
it
is it?
But George just said something that I was going to state on. They never talk about getting your x-axis and then your y-axis horizontal. They don't like, they don't like third-person perspective.
He said
So,
perspective.
think of the x as the one going out from your nose, and then the y is the one that goes across it. They can't fathom the x.
Can't or won't.
They have a conniption fit when they try to go past 2 dimensions.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably an absolute true statement. Well,
Anyway, I have to go and make some square fencing with straight lines. I'll be listening. Have fun.
Well, okay. Yeah, we'll try to do that. Yeah, water level is a very crude tool. They're cheap to construct. They're easy if you're just a guy that's hoping to mess around and contour his garden or something like that for drainage purposes or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's
they
the
work
key.
fine for that sort of thing. They're ultra cheap. It doesn't cost anything to make one.
Yeah, well, that's the key. And of course, Bev is alluding to it being a tool used in surveying. Surveyors don't use water levels. It's a good construction tool, particularly if you're trying to find, like I say, points of equal elevation. You can't see the elevation around, say, a corner of a building. You're on the west side of the building. You want to find the same point of equal elevation, say, on the south side of the building. You got to go around the corner. You can't do that with a theodolite or an auto level. So the water level perfectly fine for that, for the amount of error that you're going to get.
Yeah, depending on where, depending on the layout and the situation, yeah, you can see 2 connecting sides of a building. Yes, you can. From
like
an
I've
angle.
done.
But
or like I've done, where I've had areas where I've had wooded areas and I want to create a drainage ditch. So on the other side of the wooded area, I want to know how far down I have to go.
Right.
Compared to the near side of the wood. So take a big garden hose, fill it full of water, and put it up, say, 2 feet above the ground, and look to see how far the far end is above the ground there, so I can determine what kind of a grade I need to construct the ditch at it. So.
Yeah, they're useful. They're particularly useful when you don't have line of sight. That's the one condition where a water level comes in really, really handy. But for the most part, that's not a situation that you run into in construction. Not normally.
And the surveyor, of course, isn't going to be using that. I mean, you've got auto levels and theodolites that give you arc-second precision. You can't get arc-second precision with a water level.
No, absolutely not. No, you just can't. And they're a big pain in the ass, too. If you're talking about going more than 10 or 20 meters, maybe, so they're a pain in the neck to deal with.
Oh, yeah. The thing I found is you got to put caps on them when you're dragging them around. Otherwise, water's going to spill out of one end. And then also, once you're adjusting, the water oscillates back and forth and takes a while to dampen out. And you have to wait a minute or 2 for the water to finally settle, because it's rocking back and forth between the risers. And
Yep.
but you know, it's a crude tool and is useful. You can do it with a garden hose. I've done it where I've just put 2 clear tubes, put adapters on the end to screw them on the ends of a garden hose. So I have a clear tube to look through 1 foot up at the end of each end, and then just fill the garden hose with water. But again, I said I did that before I started buying surveying tools. Now I have surveying tools and I don't need to do that. It's a pain in the ass, as you say. It's very cumbersome to fill, make sure you get the water or the air bubbles out. And so.
Well, there are places and times when they are the ideal thing to have. But those places and times are few and far between.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you one thing. They don't work too well out here when it's minus 20 below zero.
Fill them with antifreeze.
Whereas the theodolite works perfectly well.
Yeah, theodolite doesn't seem to care much about what the temperature is, does it? No, you know, I spent 45 years of my life in the air pollution business, and one of the devices that we build is a thing called an electrostatic precipitator. And that is a huge steel box, and when I say huge, I mean take a large house and multiply times 10. Okay, it's big, but it has collecting surfaces in it that where the ash from the combustion process in a coal-fired power plant gets collected. Okay, those collecting plates are typically maybe 12 feet in width and maybe as high as 50 feet. It's pretty important that you level those things. If they're not level, they won't hang. They'll do funny things. They'll twist, or because they're made out of steel, they'll assume a big bow. You know, all kinds of crazy things start happening. And we found out a long time ago that one ideal way of leveling those is using a water level, because you're inside a box. These things are only 12 inches apart. There's no line of sight. There's no kind of optical instrument that we were ever able to come up with that would allow us to do it. So we just did it with a water level. Worked fine. But like I say, that's the only time in 45 years of construction experience that I had, or being around construction, that I ever saw anybody use one. No surveyor has ever used one.
No.
It just doesn't happen. Why would it? The guy's got stuff in the trunk of his or the back of his truck that is a hell of a lot more accurate than any water level's ever going to be.
Yeah,
so
35 years in construction. I've never seen one on a building site.
No,
it doesn't happen.
I don't think you will ever see it. I don't think anybody's ever seen it.
No, because all the Romans are dead.
Well, I think the Egyptians have been credited with knowing about the process of using water to level things, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's not like this is something somebody just came up with. The concept's been around for a while. But I find it amazing that Bev Try Thinking insists that there can only be one damn model. In his mind, it's not possible that the gravitational field is radial. If it is, then it's going to work the way we say it works. There's only one way to get all of those points to be an equal distance from the center of the mass, right?
Yep.
They've got to be curved.
Yeah. Well, this is a man who refuses to accept the very existence of spherical geometry.
Yeah.
You know, it's typical of any other flat earther. If it doesn't suit with your belief system, it's not real. Ignore it. It's not there.
What you're talking about? He refused
Well, Bev is a
to
master.
agree. If he refused to agree with his own evidence, he'll deny it.
Oh
So
yeah.
far, he
Yes.
provided us 2 pictures with drop. His auto level does not agree with water level for some odd reason.
Yeah, funny that.
Yeah, it's funny that a
Yes.
little while ago he referenced the Ordnance Survey,
Yeah.
and the Ordnance Survey people have stood him down on at least 2 different occasions and told him to shut up. The Earth is actually spherical.
Come on, guys,
No,
you know he
he
just
referenced
ignores all this stuff. I mean, he just forges ahead as if there aren't any obstacles in the way. He's very good at it. He's developed a technique where he just ignores anything that's contrary to his narrative.
Oh yeah.
He referenced the Ordnance Survey today in his show.
Yes. Yes. I'm
Yeah.
surprised I'm surprised he uttered those 2 words in conjunction. After how they treated him on Twitter and what they told him. I'm surprised he still says Ordnance Survey.
I am too, actually.
Must leave a horrible taste in his mouth.
Not really. He just references Ordnance Survey and the audience picks up as thinking that it supports his narrative.
Well,
I mean, he's good at
anybody who thinks that's as bad as
throwing
him.
that stuff out there and forging ahead and ignoring everything as if it supports his narrative, and that's how he embarrasses his guests. This ICST, is not, in my opinion, not doing very well against Bev, because Bev is just steamrolling over him, ignoring facts, ignoring important data, and just use first bullshit that supports his narrative.
After that debate he did with Bev the other last week, whenever it was, I can't agree with you on that, but
No, that was a good one. He did good on the first one, but the fact that he's back there today, Bev is adapted, and Bev now is making him not look too good.
yeah, well, it's like a game of tennis. That ball's going back and forth, and I'm sure the next time round, he'll have sort of different questions, different tactics, what have you. I don't know. Well, you've got to let him get on with it.
Sure.
Okay. He's doing what he's doing. And if you think he's dropped the ball, well, fair enough. So be it.
Then he pulled out his certificate and waved with it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and when I Can Science it says you're the surveyor, the Rakia is raging. He didn't
Yes.
say the surveyor. Why did you waive this certificate for?
Yes. Exactly.
Shout out
Exactly.
to-
He kept going on about we surveying and all the rest of it, and he pulls his bloody certificate out.
Shout out to John Watson for 10 pounds. Says, it's been almost 2 years since I told Bev his test will produce the same result in flat or globe. It's a pantomime. Complete wank. I agree with
It
you,
is
John.
complete wank.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as Bev, because Bev had admitted this before in Jose's, and of course that's gone because all those great recordings he had when he lost his channel. But he said again last night, because I listened to a bit of it last night, and he said yes, he will openly state that a water level doesn't care what surface it's on, be it flat or curved. Although he couldn't bring himself to say Earth, he had to say land. He wouldn't mention anything, anything that would stray from the Earth being flat, although he denies being a flat earther. So if a water level doesn't care what surface it's on, what's he doing?
But the thing is, see, what Chike was saying, about the certificate. We know the certificate's bullshit. We know it's just a grade report, but he flashes us out there. And to the audience and to his minions, that establishes a superior position, a position of authority or dominance, even though it's BS. It's kind of like a lawyer, or as you guys say, a solicitor in a court trial. He knows he's going to say something that will be objected to, but it's out there and it's in the jury's mind, and it doesn't matter if it's been objected to and the jury has been instructed by the court to disregard that comment.
Yeah,
What-
shout out
what-
Jeff Van Mater. I'll try it in English. Shout out to Jeff Van Mater for $4.99. No message, but I really appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you so much.
What would be more revealing is not him flashing a GCSE in land surveying, but the actual qualification he was working towards. He spent 2 years on, because that sort of certificate came out of him doing a BTEC course, an ordinary national certificate in building construction.
Yeah.
And surveying was just one of about 7 or 8 subjects. And on that certificate, it will list all of the subjects you sat. How do I know that? Because I've got one. At about the same time that he was doing that, I was doing a BTEC in building services engineering. So I've got a BTEC certificate. I know what one looks like, and it lists all of the subjects that you covered. But he doesn't show that. He just shows this GCSE in land surveying.
Yeah, the Turtle Move says Bev has a BS in BS. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, can't find fault with that comment.
No, that's, I should think, fairly accurate. Yes, sir. I do tend to agree.
I heard him say yesterday that he has a proof that water level create horizontal. He did a test. I really want to see what test he did.
Yeah.
Why
You
doesn't he
can't.
show his test?
You can't,
Why?
because they streamed it live through the Discord channel. It didn't go out on YouTube. So if you weren't a member of that Discord channel on that day watching it live, tough shit.
Oh, I got it. So nobody connected with Bev has a copy of OBS. Nobody thought to record that, huh?
Well, I don't know, but it because he said, "Oh, we streamed it live." Yeah, you didn't stream it live on YouTube. You streamed it live in your Discord channel.
Surely
Sorry,
somebody's
not
got to.
his Discord channel.
Guys,
Yeah.
what
It's okay.
he did,
You don't know. You know what? I don't need to see anything. I want to know what method did he used and what measurements he got. That's
Right.
all.
the method that he used, he had the 2 water levels. He lined up the levels in the riser, in the middle, and saw that all the levels matched. It's going to happen no matter whether you're on a curved earth or a flat plane.
That's one.
put
But I
two-
think
If you put 2 water levels side by side, the levels are all going to match. If you match one of the levels, all the other levels are going to match. He never did take an auto level or a theodolite and tried to cite the 2 ends and compare it to the middle.
No, of course he didn't.
well, I heard him say he did. He said
No,
then we
no.
moved to one side. You can go to the stream and hear it. He said then we went to one side, and they still were on the same horizontal.
Yes, but
Now let's say he
at that
did it.
point they were only separated by about 50 meters, not enough to register a difference.
No, I think the 100.
Well,
But
even
let's
at
say it's 100.
it's not
Let's say-
enough.
Let's say it's 100. What is the drop in 100? 0.78, 73. I don't remember exactly.
Not enough for him to be able to bloody measure.
0.785 millimeters, and if you take that over 100 meters, let's see, 0.785 millimeters over 100, that is going to be a difference
1.6 arc seconds.
6 arc seconds.
Right. So now we have the meniscus. What's the size of the meniscus?
Well, much larger than that.
Right. So you need to choose carefully the bottom of the meniscus, the top of the meniscus, and where you put your eye, because all you need to do is move up a little or down a little, and that's the same.
That's
Did
very possible.
he
Worse than that is the
did he use
crosshairs
any
on
method to remove any bias? For example, to mark.
But Chike, it's worse than that. The crosshairs and the scope of the auto level have a thickness generally of about 2 arc seconds.
Right. So, but let's say he matches the top of the crosshair or the bottom of the crosshair. Let's say he did it.
Well, that's
But
not
did
easy
he
to
do?
You can't do it that way.
Why?
You might be able to get a well-defined line, but you don't. You have to use the scissors in the crosshair to try to line things up. But even if you did, again, like you say, the meniscus is a problem.
So first you need to mark the points, not use the meniscus itself, but mark the points. Let's say you mark the point of the bottom of the meniscus carefully. 2 points, 2 lines. You don't want to observe the water level itself. Then you need to offset one of them, because I want to know that you're not biased. I want to know you did a real measurement, and someone will offset it by an offset you don't know. And you should tell what the offset is. Sure, he didn't do it.
Well, what he most definitely didn't do was sight from one end all the way down to the other end of his 2 overlapping water levels.
He said he did.
No, he didn't. No, he has said that he did not sight from one end to the other, and I believe where he did it, he couldn't.
He said he did it with a 100-meter water level.
Yeah.
Okay.
But his test on the day was 2 water levels, and they were overlapping.
Yeah, 2 400-meter water levels.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, right.
So I think,
So
well, were they
600.
400? Were they 200?
No,
But
they
anyway,
Yeah.
what he was quite clear about is that once he'd got all that set up, he explicitly did not sight from one end to the other.
Right.
And that is correct. I've talked to Bev several times regarding that, and he said he did not have to do that because
Yes,
the geometrical proof tells him what the result's going to be. He does not need to check it.
He's maintained that right from day one, right from the very start when we said, well, are you going to be sighting from one end to the other? No. And we all know why he's not going to do that, and he knows why he's not going to do that.
But his on this again is he claims that he doesn't need to do it because his geometrical proof tells him what the results are going to be, so he doesn't need to check it.
I know. That's his mantra.
Yeah, but sometimes he fucks up, and he took pictures of the Blackpool Tower. So far, I have 2.
We know.
I have 2. Both have a drop. I'm waiting to see the third that will probably have a drop, and that's it.
Yeah, once again, we have ourselves a Mexican standoff because my geometric proof says that it will not be in a straight line. I can draw 2 concentric circles and prove that the points along that outer circle are not in a straight line. I can't draw 3 points on it and line them up. It won't happen. So, why is his proof any better than mine? It isn't. Either test would show exactly the same thing. Exactly.
Well, pretty much everybody knows that, except Bev and his minions.
No, I think Bev does know that. I don't think Bev's quite as stupid as he comes across.
It could be.
But,
and that's why he's avoiding that topic.
Yeah, but as Charky has pointed out, he has done what most of these flat earthers, have the endless streams night after night and go out and actually do things. Like so many others of them, he has actually, on several occasions, proved that the earth isn't flat.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget Ranty the Globe Earth hero. before he saw the light, as it were. Most of them generally at some point, quite unwittingly, will prove the globe. They will show evidence of curvature and not realise it. And as Chike has pointed out, that classic photo through the auto level of Blackpool Tower.
And what's Bev's excuse for that? He didn't make the picture. His son did.
Yeah. Anytime something like that happens, he'll quite happily throw somebody else under the bus because he can't own up to it.
This time it was DP, not his son.
Oh, that's right. His son had taken photos. That's right. It was the photo that Ranty said turned him back to being not being a flat earther. And Bev had said, "Oh yeah, because we go out there and we get photos like that all the time." And then somebody questioned him, and he said, "Well, actually, I didn't take those photos. It was my son."
He said it was nicked off Facebook.
Yes, but he whenever Bev drops a faux pas like that, he just can't bring himself to admit it. You know, he has to distance himself from him straight away. And if that means throwing DP under the bus, his son under the bus, he'll quite happily do that.
Yep. Well, we've seen him do it time and time again.
Yeah.
He spent a good half hour standing Genesis down one afternoon that a sextant can only measure 60 degrees. Just absolutely berated Genesis for a long time over that concept.
Yep.
And said basically anybody that says that a sextant can measure more than 60 degrees has absolutely no idea how a sextant works. And of course, when we called him on that and pointed out the fact that the damn thing's got a mirror in it and that doubles the angular reading, all of a sudden he forgot all about his original contention that it was impossible for a sextant to measure more than 60 degrees. Then all of a sudden he came up with a tinker toy little wall hanger type sextant and says, see, it says 120 on the side of it. Well, how did you forget that to begin with, Bev? And he, to this day, will not admit that he made a mistake. He just will not do it.
That's right, because he berated Genesis and said, I've got a sextant. I know it only goes to 60 degrees. And it's like, everybody listening, I know everybody listening was going, what? He's called it, he's insisted it's 60 degrees because of the name sextant. He doesn't know how a sextant works. He hasn't got a bloody clue.
Hell no. That's exactly right.
Everybody knows the sextant only goes to 60 degrees because that's why it's called a sextant. 60 degrees. Oh, it's obvious. It only goes to 60 degrees.
No,
because they wouldn't call it a sextant otherwise. You know.
Like level
But
is
saying
always
that it would be
the name.
he went as far as saying it would be a good trap for globers if they didn't know it was 60 degrees.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly right. You know, honest people make mistakes all the time. I make them all the time. But when I make one, I own it. I admit it, and I correct it.
Yep.
What is the problem with a guy like Bev that just absolutely finds it completely impossible to say, you know, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. What's wrong with him?
Do you not think he's just reveling in the attention?
I think so.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys from the other side that the egos have fucked up any portion of Flat Earth having any unity or concise like they just, the ego, the human or male ego mostly, just doesn't really allow people. I don't know. Everyone wants to be quarterback, I guess.
But really, the argument about the sextant doesn't even make sense. Oh, if it only goes up to 60 degrees, well, if that's the reasoning, then a quadrant should be superior because it should go to 90 degrees, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I mean, it must have been, I think it's maybe 2 years since I heard of Bev's flat Earth test.
Yeah, easily.
People patiently explaining to him that this test is a fucking waste of time because it will produce the same result, whether the Earth is flat or it's a globe. In 2 years, if he doesn't accept that, then he's just taking the piss. He's just that's weird. That's really strange. You know, so you're dealing with someone who I think is willfully I don't know. It's fucking really fucking strange. I think it's his little thing. Like he just enjoys the adulation, and he's keeping it going because it makes him feel good or something.
he's got a dedicated little band of acolytes who all seem to, hang on every word he says and all agree with him 110%. And yeah, he's got his fan club.
Well, yeah, the lapdogs don't dare disagree with him.
No.
They'll draw the wrath of Rakia if they do, just like happened earlier on Bill's show.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Rakia.
Yeah.
But he did manage to put up one correct diagram, and I'm showing it live on the screen right now while we're talking. And I make no apologies for this because that was my damn drawing, Bev. Thank you very much. So I'll show it as often as I like, and that's the reality. That's really what happens. What you're seeing there in that diagram I drew is exactly what it does. All of those water levels are at the same elevation above mean sea level. They're at the same elevation, essentially, the same distance from the center of the friggin' Earth. But they're following a curve, just like we see at LIGO, Bev, just like we see at Lake Pontchartrain when we do GPS measurements. Always we see the same thing, just like that picture. So you can stomp your little feet and pitch all kinds of fits, but it's not going to change the facts. Those are the facts. Now do something that actually shows which is true. Are they all at the same? Are those water levels collinear, or are they following a curve? You have not done anything to show it one way or the other. And until you do, you're just talking out your ass.
But I don't have to, Blue. I've got a geometric proof that tells otherwise.
Well, my geometric proof's on screen, and it says something different, doesn't it?
Well, your proof obviously can't be correct.
Yeah.
Does Bev actually sell T-shirts?
No.
No, that was DP that was the T-shirt salesman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bev said that he was not scamming anybody, but he left out the part about that Patreon account he has.
Yeah, where he got a new computer, supposedly for a security system that he and his son now use it for gaming.
Well, that was different. That was e-begging, through some Christian
right
GoFundMe sort of site. But he actually has a Patreon account, just like I do, and just like many content creators have, that people can join and contribute on a monthly basis, however much they like,
But that GoFundMe through the Christian site, Blue, was a scam.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Of course it was. What the hell do you need a new computer for? I think you'd be better off with a security system if you've got security concerns, not a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it was a scam.
Worked though. Netted him $4,000.
Yeah, and I think most of it came from Rakia and Mike Jones.
I think
the vast majority of it, actually. So all Bev managed to do was take advantage of a couple of idiots. But okay, yeah, I have no problem with that. Do it as often as you like, Bev.
The fact that maybe two of his minions supplied most of the funds does not matter. He actually set up the GoFundMe. It doesn't matter who pumped money in there. The fact that it was out there in the public as a GoFundMe through this religious site that he basically scammed them.
Yeah.
Taking money from Rakia is a mitzvah. It's helps economy.
Yeah, so I just really wanted to get together and have a chit chat about water levels and what the hell they are, what they do, and what they don't do. They don't establish a horizontal plane. They establish points of equal elevation. That's all.
Yeah. Well,
You know, I think the thing that I heard about just watching like in science that, and your comments, Blue, was the like if it's really windy, for example, at one end, that would really change the results. I never thought about that. I mean, that must be a factor.
It can be. If you don't have a way of protecting the open end of that tubing, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Blow some wind across the surface of that thing and you'll see that it generates a negative pressure inside the tube.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was talking with Bev about the Fit Dogma's tangent, and I said, Pepper Organist said, but you don't have real spheres. Of course, I don't have real spheres. I have imaginary spheres or arcs of equal elevation. It's not real. It's not tangible. And they were so happy. I said, so it's imaginary. I said, yes, it's imaginary, like the plane you have in your water level. Where is the plane? I don't see it.
I think it's such a big thing with these kind of people that they can't imagine. I think it's such a big thing. They can't just hypothesize in their minds and just think, like I do, like I imagine that Blue does, and the rest of you do, to actually just think what might happen in certain circumstances, and they're just unable to do that. I think that's a huge part of the problem.
I don't think it's a question of can't. I think it's a question of won't. Because if they do, and I think they realize, like Bev does, that if he actually thinks about this problem, then he will realize the globe is real and he will lose his significance.
Well, yeah, I would agree. But I think Bev is pandering to people who support him who are in that state. I mean, fuck me. It's the the way that this has been patiently explained should be understandable by anyone in my book, really. If you don't get it by now, the way that Blue Marble Science, fucking loads of people have patiently explained why Bev's test is a load of shit. If they don't get it, then they're never going to get it.
That's why I side with that. He won't get it. He's been taught over and over again in clear, easily followed terms that his experiment is worthless, and yet he refuses to accept it.
Yeah, but the shit thing about Bev is that I think that he does actually understand it. I think he does, and he's a fucking liar.
Yeah, I think he understands it perfectly well, but he can't admit that to anybody because again, he'd lose his followers.
Yes, yeah, and there are any number of poor fuckers that still believe what he says, but he knows in his heart of hearts that what he's talking is shit, which is bad. It's bad.
I agree with you guys. I totally agree with you. Bev does know the difference. He knows. He's playing a game.
And is he making money off this, or I mean, is he monetized or like selling merchandise, or I don't know.
Well, that's what we were just talking about earlier. His channel is not monetized as far as I can tell, and he doesn't have channel memberships or any of that stuff. No super chats or anything. But he does have Patreon.
Bev got real upset when at the end of the debate with I Can Science That, because Science basically called him a scammer.
Yep.
Told him that he was only doing this for the money, and Bev, that was the only time that I saw or heard Bev really get pissed.
Yep.
I mean, there is somebody also, you talked about that before, was the T-shirts as well, wasn't he? Because he was talking about that in when he had that debate with I Can Science That.
Yeah, exactly.
That was one of the things that cropped up as well, wasn't it? It was somebody else that's selling T-shirts on his behalf, because it's got, his channel name written all over the T-shirts and things like that. But he claims that it's nothing to do with him.
Yeah, well, that was DP, domesticated pissant, or domesticated primate, or who the hell ever he is.
Yeah,
that's the guy that does the T-shirts. But I'm hard pressed to believe that Bev does not receive any funds as a result of that. Very hard pressed.
I think it is. It'd be understandable if anybody assumed that he's getting at least some money from that.
Jesus, there's no smoke without fire. I mean, Jesus fuck! It's been 2 years, at least 2 years.
Yeah.
With Bev refusing to understand the simple concept of gravitational potential. It to me, it's really weird. It's really strange.
What was very revealing about? Sorry, Brian. Sorry, Brian Watson. I didn't mean to talk over you then.
Okay.
What was very revealing about that well, it wasn't really a debate when he just had that show with our Science That was I Can Science That wasn't there? They were at one point they were talking about the Bedford level experiment. I mean, I'm not being funny, but I mean, what's difficult to understand about that experiment? It's really very, very simple to understand. I mean, once I explain that, I can guarantee if I explain that to my son and my daughter, they would get it. It's not difficult to understand, but he made out like he was having difficulty understanding how that works. There's really nothing much to understand about that experiment, really, is there?
Yeah, I'm the same. Absolutely. Yeah.
No, he feigns ignorance at the drop of a hat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a way to disarm his opponent and set you up, get you off center.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what he's doing all the time, is if he can get you off center, then you get frustrated, and what you may have had as a plan or what you wanted to see, sometimes you get followed up and you forget about it and move on. I've been down that road with him that way. And he's very good at trying to knock you off center.
Did you hear how pleased Bev was when I Can Science That said that he was happy to have a conversation about the meaning of words?
Oh yeah, that went on for an hour.
Yeah. Well, if you want to talk about the semantics, and Bev was like, "Oh yeah, oh great, yeah, fucking arsehole."
I mean, Bev is intellectually a moron, but I do give him points for being very good at knocking people off center and being able to stick with his narrative. And to me, he's got it down pat. He's been at this so long, he knows and can recognize when he's getting painted into a corner, and he'll change the subject or somehow manage to get you to drop the topic altogether.
He can obfuscate with the best of them.
Oh yeah, he's very good at it.
That was the great thing I thought about the I Can Science That conversation with Bev, was that he really got pinned down. I thought after listening to that, I thought, Jesus Christ, this is bad. Surely Bev must be done now. It was such an epic takedown if you listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it was really quite thorough. But the thing is, though, that with conspiracy theorists, unfortunately, the truth isn't actually that important. It's completely secondary to the primary belief of the conspiracy theory. The truth, I've noticed this, like in the last 5-10 years, that the truth, which I hold sacred, personally, isn't that important. It's not as important as your personal belief. So if that's the case, then we're pretty fucked.
Hey, Rumpus, give us a mic check, would you?
Hello, 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Is that okay? All right. Yeah, I've got some diagrams, of course. If you want to see those on the subject.
Well, I have some diagrams. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. No. Well, I thought I come along. I have to bring some diagrams, don't I? So if I share my screen.
Wait a second. Yeah, share your.
Okay.
Let me move. I gotta move some things around here.
That's okay. Well,
diagrams. That's a real novel idea, Rumpus.
Well, I think it's the only way of communicating with these people, because there's no point, as we know, in talking verbally with Bev and these flatties. They cannot understand anything you explain in language. They're like a sort of 7-year-old. The only thing they can understand is pictures. And of course, with Bev, it's particularly important because he thinks, I mean, as we've heard him say several times, things like, when you show him a diagram, he thinks that up the screen is up and down the screen is down, and nothing will ever change his opinion of that.
But Rumpus, he's seen those diagrams of yours, and I heard him as much as just a couple of days ago ridiculing that diagram of yours as being a wheel with spokes on it.
I didn't hear him say that. Yeah, but I haven't actually had an opportunity of getting him in a position where, I mean, I'm proposing to have a hangout with SE Montreal and co at some stage in the very near future, in which I explain about horizontal and level and things. And I'm convinced, because he's I'm on the particular subject of convincing SE Montreal and Askin, I think, and Mobius. I think the three of them I might have at the same time, because they claim there's this contradiction in the globe model of you can't have hump and a drop. And so, for instance, one of Bev's favourite phrases is when he's, Rumpusy, what about Blue's drop? Blue's hump. How can you have that and the drop? Because my observation of the Bedford levels is going to be observing the drop. And then they're going to say, well, hold on, Blue disagrees with you. He talks about the hump with the Lake Pontchartrain thing. And so I'm proposing to show to SE Montreal and others that there is no contradiction in these two things. And obviously we know this and we can see that. But they really don't, I mean, these people, they're not just pretending. The people like SE Montreal and Bev, they go on, they're saying there's this fundamental contradiction in our model. So they don't, not even understanding our model. They don't even understand what they're arguing against, I think. And I know we know that Bev does deceive. I mean, he is an obnoxious, deceiving wanker. But that doesn't stop him also being very stupid. And he seems to be both. And so he tries to deceive. But I think genuinely, I mean, you may remember I gave a presentation on blues about, was it about a week or two ago, in which I gave these sort of 5 basic principles from which to determine LIGO. I don't know if I'm sharing it. blue, but if I can
Yeah, let me take a break for a second. Shout out Earth is Life for $5. The best thing about the debate was ICST showing Bev that realizing Euclid could have been done with spaghetti and a cell phone.
Yeah, that was good.
I like that.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it? I mean, so
Rumpus,
so
you know, this whole thing, you know, I prefer probably not keep saying this is our model. I mean, this is the way it works on the Earth. When you have basically a spherical mass,
yeah, but it is a model. Yes, I mean, but
center
that's
of mass, which is at the center. You know.
yes, I mean, well,
this is the way it works on the Earth. This is it. Quit saying model because that.
Well, it's not.
immediately
Well,
puts
I'm
that
not showing
up.
exact reality, am I? I am showing the model
But
here
I'm saying that
because
puts in their mind that it's not real when you
well,
say
this
model.
is this what I've got on screen, for instance, is a model of the Earth. It's not exact because, of course, the Earth is an oblate spheroid. I've drawn a circle.
Yeah, but
So
the minute you say model, they construct this wall. They don't go beyond that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are some things you just. I mean, I know you've tried to avoid these difficult things that cause problems. I always take these things head on. I always charge like a bull. If there's a problem if there's something you've got to say and it's correct, I believe, armed with a suitable diagram and a sufficient force of explanation, you can get through. You use the correct terms. I always believe to always use the correct terms. Say something's an approximation or a model, and just charge through it and say this is. So I tend to avoid. I tend to use what's correct, but just charge through those sorts of things.
All right, that's fine, but just remember, I've given you 2 months to get through to SE Montreal on this, and the clock's ticking. We're almost almost.
I know I've almost hit your deadline. I know. Well, I've been distracted by life, and unfortunately, I will get onto it. Yes, I mean I was laying down that I think from this present was it 2 weeks ago, or whatever. I gave these 5 principles from which you can derive almost everything that we're talking about. These 5 axioms, well, they're some of the not axioms actually, because you can prove many of them, but they're principles, I suppose, that from them you can then derive all this water level crap and LIGO, how LIGO works in horizontals, and why horizontals appear to be wiggly things, as we discussed the other day. I mean, that's if you look at the elevation profile of the LIGO, it does this curve. So all you need to understand, Bev. So when I was, and also I suppose the reason is I have had opportunities to invite Bev onto my onto my channel and have chats with him. He seems to be prepared to do that, but I find the guy so revolting. I've actually, I mean, although I'm usually quite keen on engaging with these people and shoving diagrams down their throat, with Bev, I find the guy's debating ploys and tricks and things so obnoxious and so dishonest that I just find it difficult to deal with him, and I'll get so annoyed. Whereas with SE Montreal, they don't. These other people, they are equally stupid, but they're not. I don't think they're trying to obfuscate to the same level. I think they're genuinely confused. I mean, just the way Bev refuses to answer yes/no questions, and I told Arkansas that that's what he will do, and then Arkansas that commented on this fact that he does not answer yes/no questions. And so the classic one being, have you ever been aware that the Earth has been depicted as having a spherical ocean around it? And he said, no, I've never seen that. I've never seen that. And I mean, that was a great example where, because I'm very reluctant to call people liars, but we know that he must have witnessed that. So I think I got exactly correct when he said, you are a liar. And you've got to be very careful. Like, don't anybody throws around accusations of someone else being a liar. You know, in fact, they're a liar, because that's what they do all the time, and they project onto others, and they say that's because they lie all the time. They're always very keen on accusing others of lying. Whereas I think honest people, like the people in here, don't tend to throw around the words liar unless they've got a very good reason for it. And so but there was a case where you could pin down and say, Bev, it cannot possibly ever have been the case you have not seen pictures of the Earth on which you can see the ocean as a sphere. And then he made some yesterday, a day before, whatever. He then started commenting, oh well, it's got land on it and things. But we know that's again trying to weasel his way out of it. He obviously has seen that thing, and he did say he had never had it told to him that oceans were spherical. And so we can therefore then say, yes, now he's being a liar. But that doesn't make him also being very stupid. And he still doesn't, I mean, and as I was saying earlier, he's seen diagrams like this, and I think, I can't remember which who it was with. He's been seeing diagrams like I got on screen at the moment, and he says, but down must be down the page. down the monitor, and he's used this phrase several times, and those are the phrases of someone who's really stupid, not someone who's trying to deceive. And we had, I think, the other day when looking at Blue's diagram he was showing earlier, he said, "But look, it's low. It's below on the screen. It's below that point. Therefore, it's below it. It's the higher elevation in the middle." Whereas, of course, you know, I once confronted him and asked him something like 20 times, did he know that down was towards the centre of the Earth? And he refused to answer 20 times, even though I started to, shout at him and call him a wanker and things because he wasn't answering the question. And then for a couple of days afterwards, he claimed he had answered it. But I think the guy's also mentally defective in some way, because either that or he's trying to deceive in the most pathetically inept manner to claim he hadn't answered and then he had. And so I think there's also either he's basically like Nixon, he practices lying just for the sake of it, just keep himself in practice, or he genuinely has a memory of a goldfish or something, and he's got some mental problem, because we've seen them a number of times but on things that don't really matter, he's forgotten. I mean, for instance, he did an analysis, I think, in the presentation I gave here. He actually went through this presentation, and Blue's also associated description, the next day, and he said, did you do that then? And even though he had a whole 2 days later did a whole analysis of this, and he denied he'd done it, and I had to remind him, you did this and it was 2 days after that. I said, but you spent a whole thing then, and eventually he sort of agreed he did. So I think he's got some mental block as well, because he lies about things or denies things that are just simple facts of history. So it's very difficult to work out whether the guy is lying, mentally defective, or
no, it isn't.
Or just really stupid. I mean,
no, it's not hard. It's not hard to work that out. It does not. It's not hard to work that out. Everything Bev is doing is very carefully calculated.
It isn't, though. That's the point. He forgets things that aren't part of the argument, and he argues over things he's forgotten, and you can tell that he just forgets things really. So he just
does the flat Earth reset, Rumpus. That's what he does. He does the flat Earth reset.
Well, quite often as well, liars will forget their own lies, particularly if they've had a whole string of lies, because you've got to cover one lie after another to cover the next one. So they do forget, and my ex-wife being one of them.
I agree with that, actually, but he'll forget about things that aren't lies, like something happened 2 days before, like he did an analysis of one of Blue's things when I did this, and he then forgot that he'd done it, and only did it the previous day.
Yeah,
and that's not something you need to lie about. So he's forgetting things that are simple pieces of fact, not complicated constructions like I went to the shops and didn't kill this person or something, and 15 different complicated things. It's just a simple case. He couldn't remember what had happened a day before. And so, and George and I have noticed on other neutral things, he forgets these things. So there's something else going on as well that may be playing a part in this.
Yeah, because, liars don't forget their lies. They forget who they lied to.
That's also true, yeah.
Blue, there's something new, hot from the oven, from Bev. You will have to explain how science says there are no horizontal planes. I just
right. Well,
what?
Okay. So the diagram I actually wanted to present here is this one, which I did. God knows how long ago this diagram I did. Which is Bev's thing here, and I've got a water level. I need to redesign this diagram because I'm actually overlaying the blue bits. So I've got 4 water levels here, and I've actually overlaid for some reason. I'll have to redo this. That you've got the joining pipes I have got obscured slightly here by the local horizontal. So following those principles that let's go back to those principles I had here. That basically that's all you need. Is that you need to know that globers regard the Earth as a globe, a spheroid. That's why I said not a sphere, because it's oblate. Down is towards the centre of the Earth, as determined by gravity. And the other thing, of course, is the need Bev doesn't understand is you can't do this from first principles. He thinks there's a geometric proof that you can have, and of course you can't. For instance, things like gravity are not geometric concepts. The concept of horizontal is not a geometric concept. The concept of down is not a geometric concept. There's nothing in those things in Euclid because it's not geometric, it's physics. It's about physics. So you won't see the words horizontal and vertical in any of Euclid's book, except where he's talking about how you draw things on a piece of paper and have a grid. He doesn't. It's nothing to do with the geometry of the situation. So the only way you know what the shape of the Earth is by measuring it, going out and doing something in the real world. You cannot prove something about the shape of the Earth or some experience with an auto level or water levels using Euclid, because Euclid is about something you can prove logically, but that's not involved in the real world. The real world, you have to measure stuff, and immediately you do that, then you cannot use geometric logic, because the real world, you don't know what to apply, what's going on in the real world. You know, it's not, also the real world's not perfect, so there's no such thing as a geometric proof of the Earth's a sphere. You can get information and data about the Earth, like looking through an auto level and drop and things, and then say, that doesn't match this geometric model, but you can't prove that the Earth is a sphere or flat just from a deductive process starting off with Euclid's principles. You need to go out and measure something, and that's something he fundamentally doesn't understand. So this idea that he's got, that he's now reworked, I mean, this is a piece of distortion, this idea that what he's doing now is a realization of Euclid. Well, let's suppose that his realization of Euclid found something other than what's in Euclid. Well, it would have to be wrong then, wouldn't it? Because Euclid is deduced provably correct. So there's no point in going out and trying to prove something in Euclid. And I can sound like did do something I thought was quite good. That thing with the spaghetti. If Bev's objective is to just prove some proposition in Euclid, well, you can do that deductively or using a spaghetti in a plane. And the fact that he also argued about what a plane was, I mean, Jesus Christ, that was just an amazing thing. It was incredible, where he argued about using a plane and the principles. He's clearly worrying about the shape of the Earth. This whole test of his is clearly involved in the. And that's something I must say, I did find, I can find that a little bit frustrating when he was trying to be helpful and saying, Bev, so you're not trying to do anything with the real world then, sort of in trying to encourage him. But it's quite obvious that's Bev's motive, is to show something about the real world, that level is horizontal and all verticals are parallel, etc., etc. He's not trying to prove it. This is a cover story, this idea of trying to realize a bit of Euclid. It's a cover story for doing something in the real world. And he should realize that doing some... Good.
That's exactly what it is.
He states the results in advance of the test or the demonstration. So once he's already affirmed the results, he doesn't have to do anything. So then he dicks around with the water level in an ineffective way. I mean, he just and that too is intentional. If you're going I turn my auto level, looking at the column 100 meters behind me and 100 meters in front of me, and it's the same. It's like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is where he's a deceiver. He clearly he's trying to use the words Euclid in this water level test to try and give it some sort of credibility. Now, the question is, does he really understand that if you can prove something in Euclid, you've done it deductively, you don't need to go into the real world. You just do the stuff in the that's the whole point of Euclid. You don't need to touch the real world. You can prove whatever it is, this proposition 1 in book 11, whatever it is, that a line can't leave a plane if it's got part of it's it's a straight line, the rest of it has to be in the plane. Well, yeah, but you can prove that deductively. You can prove it. And prove it. We mean prove it. And that's where a case of, we don't just mean like science which can't prove things, where you cause and effect lines. That's something you can prove, and so you don't need to go into the real world to do it. And so whether or not he's just using that, now that's a case where I think he is trying to do. So I think Blue's correct on that one. That is where he's trying to deceive us or deceive anybody who's listening. So that's a case where he's being dishonest. So there's no doubt about it. Bev is a dishonest wanker, but he's also a stupid wanker. And so the question is where he's being at one moment or the other. So anyway, these principles I described on Blues about 2 weeks ago, just quickly. So down is towards the centre of the Earth, and that's something he doesn't understand, which means that's why he thinks when Blues diagram that pitch thing he was showing up earlier, where the middle of the Lake Pontchartrain diagram was above. He said, therefore it must be higher, because it's about further up the page, isn't it? So therefore it's higher. And he, as I say, 20 times I asked him if he knew that down was towards the centre of the Earth, and he didn't answer that question, but 2 days later he had.
Well, he didn't answer because he knows better. He knows that down is toward the center of the Earth. He knows it very, very well, but it doesn't play with his narrative if he actually tells his lapdogs that is, in fact, the way it works on a globe. Down is always toward the center. It won't work. He can't do that. He can't say that. He will not say that. That's just the way Bev goes about deceiving people.
I'm not... Yeah, but the thing is, he says such stupid things like up is up the page that suggest to me that he unlike your diagram with the thing with your diagram with the middle of the Lake Pontchartrain thing, he's higher than the other because it's further up the page. And the fact that he uses that, because if he knew that was stupid, I think he would avoid making those sorts of statements. The fact that he's prepared to say that just because it's higher up the page, therefore it must be higher, is someone who's not trying to deceive. That's a genuine piece of utter stupidity, and they're not realizing they're being stupid. Because if you knew that was a stupid thing to say, you would avoid it.
Not if the people you're playing to, and that isn't us, Rumpus. He doesn't care if you think he's stupid. He's not playing to you or to me. He's playing to that group of half-wits that follow him around like a bunch of puppy dogs. That's who he's saying that for.
Yeah, I appreciate that is an argument. I still think he could avoid the subject and get it more right. But I agree with you that that's a slight crack in my argument. Yes, that he's not trying to make a logical argument that's foolproof or can be easily demolished, because the people he's talking to people like Paige, for instance, who just don't understand what's going on, but they just know what she wants to agree with. But I think you would avoid it if you knew that was bollocks. You would do a separate argument, and you would say other things that you think are more, closer to being correct than something that's so obviously such an incredibly stupid thing that you would avoid it. But anyway, the other side, that elevation basically is the distance from the centre of Earth, although it's actually mean sea level, because obviously because obviously the Earth is slightly oblate. If it was from the centre of the Earth, you would actually get the wrong elevation. But that's a conceptual. That's why it says as a fundamental concept. It's from the centre of the Earth, but it's actually relevant to mean sea level. But the point is, mean sea level is a distance from the centre of the Earth, although that varies as well because of the oblateness, because of it's rotating. But principally, as an approximation, elevation is the distance from the centre of the Earth, and then horizontal is a tangent to the conceptual as defined by Rez, and is perpendicular to, and that's the key thing, it's perpendicular to the vertical radial, and straight lines up. So so those are the principles that I described. But the actual diagram I want to show is this one here. Is this one here, and so where I've got 4 pot risers connected together, although I say I've managed to obscure them all. And as you were saying earlier, Blue, and I've been saying for some months, although he's got a clip in me, he played a clip in me yesterday saying you can use a water level to establish. Yes, you can use it, but you then need another tool to determine. So, for instance, here we've got the first 2 risers in this thing here. This is a horizontal created by the first 2 risers in this water level. So you can create a horizontal, but you then need another tool to do it. If I said to you, what the water level does, and this is where this Wikipedia page is wrong, is that it gives you points, the water and the 2 risers are at the same elevation, i.e., following the principle I described earlier, the same distance from the centre of the Earth. But if you want to create a horizontal from that, and I think I had Paige saying this, about 2 months ago, she was saying, but I've used a water level to create a horizontal, and she then said that's because I made 2 shelves or something horizontal. No, what she did was to put a water level on one and a water level on the other, and establish they had the same elevation. If you want to know what's horizontal, if you want to create this horizontal that he goes on and on and on about, and then you have to then use another tool. You have to then look through through here with an auto level or something between the 2 to create this horizontal.
Yeah, take a break. Yeah, without a doubt, with all the descriptions of using a water level is like in the confines of like a factory where that arc or the Sagita is below specifications. It's inside the noise level. So that's why they keep talking about it in those terms, because nobody in their right fucking mind is going to do hydro leveling multi-miles.
No, of course not. Why would you do that? Yeah. You've got tools that are much, much more accurate than that water level, and much easier to use.
The water level would be fabulously accurate. It's just it would be completely so damn fucking difficult and nobody would do that.
It would be very. I mean, Blue, you can get these water levels with these micrometers on the top of them, so I think they can be incredibly accurate.
I know that, and it will establish 2 and only 2 friggin' points. That's it.
Yeah.
You've got an auto level or a theodolite sitting there that will establish every damn point.
Exactly. So the question. Exactly. So if you wanted this horizontal, this red line that I've got here between these 2 water levels, and you said, well, okay, if the object of my exercise is to determine a horizontal. Well, how are you going to do? Where's this red line? How am I going to go on? If I want to find, say, at this point here, I want to find that's horizontal. How do I do that? Just with the water level. I've got this thing is say this is 20, say there's 30 meters between these two, and I wanted to put something here that was horizontal between these two things. How can I do that with just using the water level? I can't.
No, you can't.
I would have to move the water level to the point that I'm interested in. So
and now you've got
it's
another
complete.
center point.
Yeah, and you've changed it. And of course, if you
and that is how in like in a factory setting or a warehouse setting, yeah, you have one set up at your key point of interest, and you take the other one, and because you can go around the wall or whatever, but you're only going 40, 50 feet. Yeah, if you do the second water level is portable. Yeah, you take that with you.
And all you've done is to show that 2 points are at the same elevation. At no stage, if you move the water level, have you done something like create the horizontal. No, you haven't. All you've done is to determine that this other water level is at the same elevation, the water level in it is at the same elevation as somewhere else. You haven't created a horizontal you can look along unless you use another tool, like something optical, like an auto level, in which case, if you're going to use an auto level, then you don't need the water level at all. So
yeah, without
it's
a doubt. But again, in site obstructed scenarios where you are running pipe through different walls, carrying the far end of the water level portable with you, yeah, it gives you 2 points of equal elevation. Great, and that's all the information. That's the information you're looking for, without a doubt. But you can put that take that into like a closet where you may have a drain coming out, and you want to make sure the drain has the 2% grade. Right, yeah, you can do that blind by carrying the far end of the water level. It's portable. It's on 100 feet of hose, and yeah, you're bebopping in and out of the different bathroom facilities or conveyor belt attachments. Yeah, that's a great application still.
Yeah, well, 99.99% of the time we're not flattening anything. We're leveling something. We're not flattening it. We're leveling it.
Yeah.
We're quite
we want to
content.
make sure nothing runs downhill.
Yeah,
unless you're LIGOing it.
Right. We're quite content with a slight curvature in that and we're quite content knowing that sight line that we have from a theodolite or an auto level is not accurately representing the curvature of the Earth. We know it can't. But that's okay over the short distances that we're normally using that for in those sorts of scenarios you're talking about, Larry. That's it's perfectly fine for that. We can live with that small, tiny amount of error that we're talking about.
But as you say, Blue, surely almost all the time you're interested in level. You don't want the horizontal. What you do actually want is level. So whatever error it is that you're talking about horizontal, you actually want it, because what you want is the level. You want it to be elevation to be the same if you're doing drains or something. So actually the error you're talking about is the error you would get if you try to do it with an auto level. The water level is actually giving you what you want almost also. And this is something I didn't appreciate until about 2 or 3 years ago when talking with George. I was trying to work out, you've got this auto level device, it gives you horizontal, and I was trying to work out, well, what actually do surveyors want? Do they want it to be level? Do they want it to be horizontal? And of course, it only took me some weeks thinking about it to think, of course, you always want it to be level. You're only interested in the elevation. You want buildings or whatever to be slightly bowed out, or the verticals to be represented correctly. Because if you want water to flow or something, you want. I know, and because you're doing something horizontal, that would mean that if you drew some diagrams or your control network, you'd have to say, well, everything's horizontal to this point. Whereas, of course, the thing you want is to be level with respect to what's level on the Earth. That's the thing that matters. You don't want some particular point with it horizontal to, because that's useless to you. You want if you're designing a swimming pool or something, you want it to be level.
Which is exactly why the procedure when using an auto level is after as the rod gets 150 feet away from you, you pick the gun up and move it. Yeah,
exactly.
And that takes care of any accumulation of the millimeter or two that would accumulate. Yeah. By procedure, you self-correct by moving the instrument every couple of 100 feet.
Yeah, so that's the key thing is. Sorry, go ahead.
The other part of procedure is you do the back sight the same distance as your foresight, and you don't take your elevation of the instrument into account.
Yes, of course. That's differential leveling, and that's what it's for. It washes out the curvature of the Earth.
And that's the wonderful thing. I didn't realize this actually until about 2 years ago as well, when I think Larry mentioned it in some way. I thought, because I couldn't understand what was backside, foresight. Why are they obsessed with it? I was thinking, and then I realized, of course, after after Larry mentioned that's what you did, that of course that means not only does you having the same backside and foresight, I've got another diagram, but I won't go into that, that if you do have the same backside and foresight, you eliminate the curvature of the Earth, and this is why planar surveyors, of course, never have to worry about it, and people like Brian never have to worry about it. If you do have an equal backside and foresight, not only do you eliminate the Earth's curvature, you also eliminate refraction. And so that's why these planar surveyors that Bev keeps on going up to, so don't have to worry about the curvatures, because if you have equal backsight and foresights, it's eliminated from your procedure. And the whole point of the...
No, there's a third one. By having the mandated distance behind you to distance in front of you, you also negate instrument error.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. A good point. Yeah. No,
That's
yeah,
right.
Very good. Yeah.
It's going to be off both directions. It's going to be off the same amount in both directions.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got another diagram for that actually. Yes, that was it. Yes, that's a good. That's the thing. I forgot. I said normally it's just the two. But yes, you're absolutely right. Although I didn't remember that. Yeah, that's something I've been aware of. But that's a good point actually. Yes. So yes, it eliminates all sorts of errors doing that equal backside and foresight that I hadn't appreciated until a couple of years ago. But the point is, you've got a tool that creates horizontals, and what you want in surveying is something that creates levels. So you actually got a tool it's not doing not one. And I think actually, Larry, you mentioned it's if you had a tool that gives you the level, and I think you were saying that some of these theodolites can do that for you. They can say that this over this point over here is level with this other point, whereas of course with just a basic auto level, you're using a tool that can only create horizontals like we've got here. But if you want the level, if you want the level, you go ahead.
Yeah, so it's pointed out when FE Core used a big fancy digital level and they were going to do some sort of force the line bullshit. Yeah, then they to their credit, they admitted they had an electronic instrument and they did not disable curvature correction. So yeah, electronic instruments do the maths for you so that it reports elevation, not just a rod reading of your local horizontal. So yeah, in my theodolite, in my TopCon total station, I can set a refraction constant, and I cannot set a radius because that's fixed, right? There's no reason to do that. And you can query the keyboard real time when you're measuring to a reflector. It gives you a distance and vertical angle. It'll give you delta elevation, not just a simple tangent calculation.
Yeah, so you've got this tool. If you're just using a basic auto level like the one I've got, it gives you horizontals. But if you wanted to do a big surveying job, say over several miles or something, that's not what you want. That's why, as Larry was saying earlier, you break it down to lots, and then you sort of your little horizontals, which we haven't discussed here. The fact there are multiple horizontals, you actually don't want it to be horizontal. That's not what you want. You want things to be level. You want them to have the same elevation. You want them to be the same distance from the center of the Earth. And the auto level is a tool that can only do straight lines. So you then try and do a procedure to give you the level. You're trying to
every survey textbook has pages on reading the rod and correcting or measuring your vertical angle and putting in the additional for the curvature and taking out the margin for refraction. It's all in the book, right? That is what surveyors are. That's what they're taught. There's nothing new or mysterious about that. Yeah, if you have to shoot across a valley at 20 miles with a vertical angle, yeah, you got to pull out your pencil and paper, do several, additional calculations, not really corrections of error, just additional calculations.
Yeah, so the point is the auto level just gives you horizontals, and that's not actually what you want, but there are procedures for you to compensate for the fact that it's giving you all these bloody straight lines you don't want, because you want the curved level as I've got in this diagram, and there are various procedures like using backsight and foresights being the same distance that eliminate that curvature to give you the level on the other side.
Well, most of the time that's not what you want. Occasionally you do want it straight. Occasionally you run into a situation like LIGO, where you actually want it to be a flat, straight, use whatever adjective you want to use there. You want it to be without curvature.
Yeah, the Stanford Linear Accelerator waveguide. It was a couple of miles long, buried subterranean, and yeah, they only had like a 1-inch bore on the waveguide, and they had to go a couple of miles. Yeah, you can't be off a couple millimeters.
Yeah, right. So in other words, 99.99% of the time, you don't want horizontal, you want your level.
You always want elevation. Okay, don't need to repeat that again. Yes, we always want elevation. We do everything to return elevation, and using the tools and in the range. And if our elevation doesn't give a shit for 1/4 of an inch, that makes it a lot easier. But quite often, as you pointed out, particularly when we're working around gravity flow systems like sanitary systems across like a large city, yeah, you need elevation. If you're using an auto level or any sort of kit whatsoever, you got to know what's coming in to get what's coming out so that you can maintain elevation. Right. There's procedure with a tool.
Yeah. So the point is, so what this water level does, as following the principles, those 5 principles or axioms, whatever I described earlier, that means that something of the same elevation is the same distance from the center of the Earth. So that's why I've drawn this other circle here. So there's the center of the Earth. That means that all this point on this dotted line is at the same level. And this is where Bev gets all excited. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm really not sure whether he, as you say, you think he might be, but he thinks that being down here, going down here, that he doesn't understand that down is towards the center of the Earth, even though he's being told this a billion times by 57 million people. But anyway, so that means that this dotted line represents something of the same elevation, and the water level obviously gives you the same elevation. That's really what the tool is, and I think the Wikipedia page should be edited to remove that reference to horizontal, really. And so if you want to then join the line between the two, that will give you a horizontal, yes, but it won't give you a horizontal at the water level. It'll give you the horizontal because that's when it meets the radial that comes up to that point, which is the vertical at this point here, because that line between the two is actually, just from some simple geometry, is pointing perpendicular to that line, which goes to the center of the Earth. If you want, because obviously verticals are radials, and if you want to, and you've got this line here, and then we'll say, well, what's that horizontal to? Well, the only point at which that is perpendicular to the vertical is in the middle. All the other points over here, it's not horizontal. This horizontal, let's have another diagram. Okay, I'll go into that in a minute. So the point is, by joining these two, you get a horizontal which is for the midpoint, and obviously if that's a big distance above, but of course the thing about the Earth's curvature is it's so small that it's the difference between level and horizontal over 20 or 30 meters is less than a millimeter. So why you don't need to worry about it. This is of course Bev doesn't. He thinks that because you've got one, because they match, and he has done a test. I think it was over 50 meters where he checked with an auto level the water levels were the same thing, and of course they are. Over that distance, your instrument resolution can't tell the difference between less than a millimeter over a distance of 50 millimeters. It's much less than a millimeter over that distance. So of course, therefore, he's saying, "Oh well, I've confirmed the water levels and auto levels are giving me the same result." Go ahead.
Yeah, someone asked me, could that be measured? I go, well, yeah, it could be. But the setup on that would be incredibly difficult, and yeah, it would be very difficult to be dealing with the 3,960 mile radius arc, and you're only going 100 meters in any direction. Yeah, you can definitely deal with that, but that gets hard to certify. Yeah. To certify, yeah, but the instrumentation is capable, but then the setups get really, really tedious.
Over what distance? Sorry, what distance you think you could detect it? Did you say? Sorry, the difference between horizontal and level.
Well, give me a budget. I'll tell you a distance. Right? Yeah, like I said, at 50 meters, yeah, it could be sorted out, but that's really freaking hard.
Yeah. I mean, you're dealing with differences of less than a millimeter, substantially less than a millimeter.
Oh, less than a millimeter. Yeah, a millimeter. A millimeter shows up at the big distances, like 100 meters.
Yeah. So it's so yeah. So basically, you can't. So this is where Bev in his head. He said he thinks in his head. I mean, assuming he's not lying, he's convinced himself, or he's lying about it, that he's checked in an auto level that the water level and the auto level agree. Therefore, he says, as far as he's concerned, those two things are the same. That horizontal and every time Blue or Larry or I tell him, yes, but over a distance of 50 meters, you're not coming out. Your instrument's not accurate enough to detect. And George has gone through this in excruciating details, talking about the resolution of the instrument. You can't detect the difference over a distance of 50 meters, which is what he's checked. And this is why RECT.
It's ambiguous. It's ineffective. It's inconclusive unless you put a whole lot of fucking effort into it. So yeah,
and that's why RECT.
And that's what the science, I can science that he was pointing out. He goes, your results are good, are fundamentally or practically so similar, you wouldn't tell the difference. And Bev didn't like hearing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why Rect is having to do things over to get a decent sized difference between level and horizontal. I'm doing this thing over 8 kilometers to give me 17 feet's worth of drop. So then that's something, you know, that's substantial enough to. I mean, I think Bob the Science Guy tried to do it over half a mile. And he got, you know, an inch or something difference. Well, that's not going to impress anybody, is it? An inch. So that's why I want 17 feet. I want a great chunk of difference that you cannot argue about in Rect.
Like Wallace did right after Robotham.
Yeah, and of course I'm going for drop rather than the hump, and this is something else. We could go into the difference between drop and hump that I'm proposing to do with SE Montreal, but I'll stick with water levels just at the moment. So, so here we have a water level.
Like on my valley here, I can look across to a radio tower, and the radio tower is 400 feet higher, but I have to look down to it, and they don't even like hearing that. 511 feet of curvature. 80 feet of refraction. Numbers so fucking big that you could do it with you could do it even with cheap kit.
How far did you say that was away? That radio tower?
27.7. Public access. Come on out, Western Maryland. Bring your own equipment, or you can use mine.
Sorry, how far did you say this radio tower was away from you?
27.7 miles. 47 clicks. 47 clicks.
47 clicks, right? 47 kilometers, right? Yeah. So that makes it very easy. Whereas obviously I'm trying to do it with this Rect thing over this Bedford levels. Because obviously the thing I need water to go join the two things, so that I can then say I've got a common reference that I can guarantee.
Hydro leveling is what they insist upon, which is just unnecessary. But they insist on it, just like they want to build a mile-long LIGOS waveguide themselves.
Yeah, but that's the only way of getting through. And unfortunately, the Bedford levels provides me with that option. It provides me with a nice straight. I mean, it's one of the key things you need to do this. Is you need something to be straight so you can look along it optically, and you need something that's not flowing. Of course, you must have a static body of water, because it can't. You must be able to guarantee the elevation at the two ends are the same. And then I got a sufficient thing to do it. And then, as you say, they insist on this because at least they do accept the water has the same elevation. So I'm obviously using that as my reference, and then saying, okay, then how come? And of course, the thing is, they then start. Bev, for instance, is allergic to having two auto levels pointing at one another. I mean, this is just incredible. He says you shouldn't do that, as though you've broken it in some way. It's just an extraordinary comment to say you shouldn't do that. So that's going to give you some erroneous results. It's very weird.
Never cross the streams.
Indeed, yes. So just right. So this is here the point. I did get a bit frustrated with Icon Science that when he was sort of dodging around the issue of the fact that more than, because Bev kept on. I mean, if you listen to that thing, I think something like every 3 minutes he would say horizontals, water levels define a horizontal. So I did feel as though Icon Science, perhaps he wasn't really familiar with it, but you need 3. If you have 3 water levels, they then don't form a line. So, for instance, if I have this thing here and I extend it, obviously, then it's not going to agree with the third riser. But of course, you need a decent distance. This is where it gets to the issue of the distance between them. And that Bev might say, well, I've got 3 risers or something over a distance of 50 meters and they're not different. Well, yeah, over that distance, you probably couldn't tell it. But if you have these things sufficiently far apart, then these risers are not going to form a line. They're going to form a level, which is curved. And so, of course, we do say to him, well, okay, if you need to go and do that with 3 risers. But I guarantee if we make him do it, I mean, I'm having to do this 8-kilometer thing. You know, to see any difference here, I don't know what you'd probably have to see something of a few inches. You're going to have to go across half a mile or something. So, unfortunately, when we say to him, you know, use 3 risers, you're going to have to do over half a mile or a mile to get anything you can measure at all with an auto level. So, unfortunately, he's never going to do that. He's never going to do anything over half a mile or something. He can't be. So, unfortunately, we're a bit stuffed there.
I doubt he has the equipment that's accurate enough in the first place, nor the experience to use it.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, conceptually, I think so. I can stance that. Sort of, unfortunately, you could just make it so much clearer and cut down about 50% of the chat by saying to Bev, yes, the point we're making is that you might be able to draw a line. You could because you can draw a line between any 2 points. So he keeps on going on back to defining. Yeah, and any one of these lines, you could draw all sorts of lines, and there'll be some point, and any line I was to draw here, if I was to draw an arbitrary line here, for instance, say I drew this line here of an arbitrary length. There's going to be one point on that is going to be perpendicular to a radial. So if I get a radial from here, for instance.
Yeah, there's any radial you like. You'll find a point on that line that.
Yeah. So now if I then rotate, if I then get this, so that's obviously not vertical. And then, but if I come here, I'm just going to put the center of rotation at the Earth here.
I have a quick question while you're muttering around that.
Right.
Do you have a date?
Not yet. I've been. Okay. George is not well. I want him to come over, and he's still not quite fully recovered. And I've had my own problems as well. But I'm back on the case. It should be happening within a month, basically. And I've got to do some preparatory work and God knows what. So there's going to be some point where this radial that I've got coming out from the center of the Earth will cross this at a perpendicular, and at that point, that's going to be the point, the vertical for this line. So that means that any line that you draw that is long enough, I mean, obviously, if you had a line that was only this long, okay, that is not going to cross the radial. The perpendicular to this is not going. So in other words, you need to cross it perpendicularly. So if I then, yes, in fact, the best way to actually what I should have done is to say if I create a perpendicular to this. So if I clone that. And then rotate it by 90 degrees. Hello? Oh, it's bloody. Oh, sorry. I've right that by 90 degrees. So there we go. So there I've created the line that's perpendicular. So then it's a case of then saying, right. So if you start off with just an arbitrary line, let's make that a different color. So in other words, if you start off with this red line, say any arbitrary line that you create, and then you create a perpendicular, say, well, eventually, the point you can move this a lot up and down until eventually the other end crosses the center of the Earth. It will then become a vertical, then become a radial. So you can then say, right. So if you have any arbitrary line that you can create, now I've created one that's perpendicular to that line. This blue line, I've defined it's perpendicular. I rotated this by 90. I cloned it and then rotated it by 90 degrees. So you can say, aha, this point here, when it touches the center of the Earth, that then becomes the vertical for that line. And that means that only at this point here is this line horizontal. It's the horizontal at this point because, of course, as I've got my other diagram I might show in a minute, where if you move along this line, it's no longer vertical. The vertical for that line is only there. It's not vertical anywhere else on that plane. And Bev says something like, I think someone said at the start, Bev was challenging us, how can you have horizontal lines on a globe Earth? He's claiming that we can't have it. Yes, it's only vertical and horizontal at this point, but we can say that this red line, all the points, or any so I take an arbitrary point on this line here. Right, now that point there is on the line, but it's horizontal with respect to this point here. This point here. So if I make that in that color, all the points on this line are horizontal with respect to this purple point here. So we do have a horizontal plane. But if I wanted to know what vertical was for this point here, the vertical, let me, if I go and get this thing here, the vertical for that, if I clone it and then rotate that round, the vertical for that is then just on the center there, and I rotate this here. The vertical for that is clearly, it's got a different vertical to the vertical for that point there, but it's on the same horizontal plane with respect to that point. But the if I wanted to consider that point by itself and say what's the vertical and horizontal here, well, it's different. The vertical has got to be for a radial, i.e. a line that goes through the center of the Earth, is not parallel to that. but we can still say that all the points on this red line are horizontal with respect to this purple point. So we can have horizontal planes on the Earth, but they're horizontal with respect to one point. So the challenge, whoever it was, who made it up. So we can have horizontal planes on this, and this is become one of his favourite memes now. That on the globe, he was claiming that I Can Science Act was trying to avoid this issue. That yes, we can have horizontal planes, but they're just horizontal with respect to a particular point. I mean,
hi, Rumpus.
Not... Hello.
Hi, Rumpus.
Oh,
bye, Rumpus. Hello, hello, Rumpus. Bye, Rumpus.
Right, jolly good. Excellent. Right.
Hey, shout out to JSS Tiger for $5. When you have to explain basic geometry to people questioning the shape of the Earth, sigh. I agree with you, man.
Well, yeah, the question is, are they stupid or are they delusional or are they liars? This is always the issue. And they just want to believe in something because this is a little bit more complicated than the flat Earth model, and some of them just can't cope with it.
Well,
and Bev, honestly, I think Bev thinks that going up and down the pages up and down, he doesn't understand that going down is towards the centre of the Earth. I really think he doesn't. Well, God, I don't know. I think it's a 70% chance he doesn't understand that even now.
The question is really very fundamental and very simple. Are the elevations of a water level with multiple risers in it collinear points or not? Are they or are they not? And so far, all Bev has is something I would call a pseudo test. It's not a test. It's an observation, but it fits both models and it fits them equally well. And that's what I Can Science That was saying. That's what we've all been saying for a long time. That's what we've been pointing out to Bev. It does not determine in any way, shape, or form that those points are collinear or that a water level with 3 risers in it or 5 risers in it or however many you want to put are forming a straight line. It just can't do that. You're using the very thing that you are claiming is straight to prove that it's straight. That's not the way science is done.
Right. So, in fact,
Bye, Rumpus.
Hey, Carlos.
Oh, Carlos. Oh, bloody hell. What the hell, Carlos? That's great.
What's that? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on.
That's okay. That's okay. Thanks, Carlos. That's Carlos. He's my field engineer. Yeah. So, right. So let's do what Bev. Let's imagine. Let's just change. So what I've done is I've created. I haven't got the bloody water thing as well. Hopefully, I got that as well. Did I get that? No, I didn't. Okay. So with his thing, all he's doing is he's then creating. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to connect the.
Yeah, we get the idea. It's all right.
Yeah, let me just. Okay, if you can get the idea, if you're prepared to let me get away with that, right? So, so he's, and if I just change, I'm just going to change the color of everything is a bit to give it different colors of the. Ah, good. I can just change the color of that. Excellent. Brilliant. So I've now got a set of overlapping water levels, and of course, as you can see here, you would get the way he's. I think he hasn't actually expressed what it is he wants at the end to differ. Well, of course, his test doesn't really. Whatever his test is, he thinks he's trying to do. I presume he thinks that because he's going to fill one of the water levels up to the same one. He's then saying, well, okay, what are the other ones then going to be at the same level? If I fill up one water level to match the water level in the next adjacent one, and they're connected by different water tubes, are they then going to match at the other end of my thing? And of course, they do that on the globe. So as I can say, the one thing I did like at what he did was then he went on about this is not discerning difference. Of course, something we've told him about. Blue's done it. I mean, everybody's ever encountered him has told him it doesn't differentiate. As you can see here, it makes no difference that you have got 2 water levels. That if you make them agree in one place, they'll agree in another. So it doesn't differentiate between a flat Earth and a globe Earth. And actually, this is where you might be right, Blue, about him trying to deceive. I think because he's been told this about 50 billion times. He's now claiming that it's now a Euclid test, and it's not a test of whether or not the Earth is curved, as some other justification for him spending whatever it is time he's doing to to execute this completely pointless test, and he obviously wants to make it have some point, and now he's trying to ad hoc or post hoc justify what he did, and that does suggest that he's lying about it and did understand that it's not testing anything, but we can't be sure, of course, because he's, as well as being very stupid, he's also a deceiver. And the question is he being a deceiver in this case, or is he being a liar? We don't know for sure. But anyway, the point is that his test, as I'm showing here, would give the same result. Levels would line up. If you make them line up in one pot, they will line up in all the pots, whether you're on a flat Earth or on a spherical Earth. So his test is utterly, 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 utterly pointless. And of course, now he's saying it's a Euclid test. But because, hey, if he's going to do a Euclid test, then I thought I can sometimes do an excellent thing with the spaghetti. Or you can just say, well, if he's doing a Euclid test, within Euclid, you don't use real-world tests to test Euclid. It's an arbitrary abstract geometry thing, logic-based thing, and so you just use logic and geometry. You don't have to go into the real world to prove any of the geometry in Euclid. You prove it by the axioms and then going on using logic to derive these things. And his attempt to claim Euclid to give him some sort of credibility for his idiotic test does suggest he's being a devious little wanker. But
well, he likes name dropping. That's all. Yeah, he uses that as his certification or his erudite investigation, and he declares the end at the beginning. He said they are a plane, they are all collinear, and Euclid says anything is collinear, has to all be the same. Okay, so he's done. He might as well go home. But he pulls out the water level and just plays it like a monkey with a football. Yeah, and then he gets these hundreds and hundreds of glowing comments.
And the point is, of course, this is not a Euclid test, because the Euclid principle he's trying to test is about things that are parallel. But of course, these are not. We're showing it here that they're not parallel, and he hasn't tested that. And he's proud of it. He says, I don't need to test that multiple risers form a line. I'm just going to assume it. Well, if you're going to assume the result, and he didn't understand Eikenstein's, well, who knows whether he's lying or not. He didn't seem to understand that he's presuming the principle that he's relying on to make the point. But if you can't presume that in the real world, you can do it in Euclid, where you can take if you've derived something, you can then use that principle, but you can't in the real world. You have to test. If your premise is that all the risers are in a line, well, you've got to test that, mate, first. And he doesn't want to. He won't. He says, I know. It says Euclid says that they'll be in a line, but Euclid knows nothing about the shape of the Earth. It's nothing about vertical and horizontal, nothing about water levels. There's nothing in Euclid about these things. These are not defined by Euclid. They're defined by physics. So it's, oh, God, he's an idiot. And an obnoxious one as that. So yeah, so his test is flawed in all sorts of ways. He's now claiming it's a Euclid geometric test, and he's using the real world to do it. And that's completely incoherent, illogical thing, because if it conflicts with Euclid, whatever he's doing, then what you're doing is wrong, because Euclid is provable.
Of course it is.
So yeah, so I should write that down actually. So his premise, he's relying on the premise. What premises that Bev is relying on here?
But a test, Rumpus, is to determine what is, not what should be. The test is to determine what is. And that's the one thing that test doesn't do. It doesn't determine, that's why it's not a test. The pseudo test, it does not determine what is. It determines what Bev thinks should be.
Yeah, and he's relying on, to do this Euclid test, he's relying on that premise one there, that rises in a water level form a horizontal line. He's just presuming that.
Well, you've got to do a test to prove that, to show that.
Exactly. Yeah. What are the
and there has not been anything about his pseudo test that comes close to doing that. Nothing.
Yeah. In fact, I think that's the only premise.
It's a rank assertion. That's all.
Yeah, I think is that the only premise he's using? I'm trying to think now. Is that the only premise he's relying on? I think it is. Actually, isn't it?
The question will be, if you're told level is horizontal, and you're told that two lines are lying on the same surface, why are you going to test one and not the other? Why test the other? Because we were told the two lines will always lie on the same flat surface. So
because you know the answer. I think it's because you know the answer.
Well,
he
I know
knows
the other answer too. But so I know the two answer. Why do I need to test one and not the other? Why the other is not need to be tested, but this one should be? We told both things. That's what he says. So if we told this and we told that, we don't need to test anything. That's what main science tells us.
And he's proud of not testing this. He says that he's got a line. Well, Euclid, obviously, in the Euclid proposition he's dealing with, it says if you have a line, then another line that's in the same plane will not leave that plane or whatever. If it's parallel to that other line, then it will not leave the plane. But this is whole based on the fact that you've got a line. And he's not testing. And he's even said that he refused to look, just like Rakia has done the same thing, I think, to you, Blue, and George, saying he refuses to look along from one end to another of a series of stakes or whatever he set up of the same elevation. He refuses to look from one end to the other. Or he said he did. He's confusing. I think Rakia said he did and sometimes, and then other times he said he hasn't. But they clearly are allergic to looking over a series of staffs that are supposedly have the same elevation to see if they do indeed line up. Go ahead.
Well, photographically, that's about impossible anyway, because it would just be so noisy, because you're still near the ground, and you have to, at a distance that's significant.
Yeah,
got to be well over half a mile.
Yeah,
and you would get inconclusive. It would photographically kind of shoot the whole mile in one photograph near the ground.
I think Rakia said the point was he was asked, I think, by Blue or George, that over something he had done that was over half a mile long. I can't remember what it was, but I thought the distance was almost to the point where he could see that there was a problem. And of course, you can see this with water. If you assume that water is horizontal, of course, you can see quite easily over a distance that there's drop. So you don't even need, and this is what I'm doing with Rect, of course. I'm using my water as a level, and then looking using an auto level to look along and saying, am I getting drop or not? And even as I think someone was showing pictures of Bev when he was doing Blackpool,
he was showing drop. You got a giant target. Yeah, you got a giant target and 17 feet of drop. Yeah, so it will be evident. But when you're dealing with stakes and staffs and water levels near the ground at a tiny little half a mile, photographically, they're going to have to spend more on their fucking camera to get away from that. And still, you're near the ground. It's going to suck.
Why you say this? Jessica Slopsy showed clear drop on over half a mile.
Yeah. And this is, using the auto levels pointing method, which Bev says is not something you should ever do, presumably because he knows that that's giving him a result that he doesn't like. If you do have two auto levels pointing methods, we're doing. I mean, you could think of these as being two auto levels. Well, I could. No, I got another diagram somewhere.
Oh, we can imagine it.
Yeah.
Because it shits all over his
argument. I've got right. So here we go. Yeah. So here I've got a diagram with two auto levels, and if I just pointed those round the other way, if I had A and B and I pointed them round the other way, you can clearly see if they're at the same elevation that B's line horizontal here. Of course, this is the thing that Bev gets always excited about. We've got different horizontals for each person because of course each person here has got a different down because they're radials. Therefore, because horizontal's perpendicular. I mean, the fact that he talks about horizons having anything to do with horizontal, just unbelievable. That is just incredible that he says that. So anyway, so the definition of horizontal is being perpendicular to vertical. So if we just draw a line down to the center of the Earth for this person A and this person B, that means you're going to get these two radials, which are different angles, which means that the horizontal for B is this dotted line here, and the horizontal for A is this dotted line here, which means that the horizontal for B, that what the auto level will see, will be up here. Look, it's going above the auto level at A, and A also will be seeing that the auto level, his auto level, is going to show above the auto level at B. And so this is the classic thing he doesn't want you to do. Now, whether that's because he's unbelievably stupid or just lying or both, I'm still not sure. But anyway, there's a demonstration of what Jesse did, and the result that you get is that each auto level looks below the other. They do not look straight into the line because it's not horizontal.
In South Louisiana, when we do a lot of survey work, a lot of it ends up going over water just because of the nature of the area. And when we do survey over water, we actually try to go to the highest point to get our measurements from as high above the water line as possible. We'll measure out to an all rig or a platform, and we'll go up to the upper decks of the platform. We'll be 60 to 100 feet above the water line, and then just measure down to the water line. Now, if it's something like in the Gulf, we'll use something like a Hazen tide gauge or something that's accurate to within a tenth of a foot or better to be able to compensate for tides and waves and all of that. But even on stagnant water, we're trying to get as high as possible and just measure down to it instead of getting as close to the water as possible.
To avoid refraction issues, right?
Exactly. Now,
And of course,
I do have to take a little bit of a gripe about a couple of things that you said. The first one was whenever you had mentioned earlier about an inch is not impressive. If you tell my wife that, I will be pissed off. And the second one was about the elevations based off of level as being distances from the center of the Earth. It's actually, the level is actually based on equal
relative
potential of gravity. It's gravitational equal potential. So when we do gravity surveys, we could actually get a more accurate level, and we could actually bring that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I did actually say at the start, perhaps you missed the start, I did say that conceptually it's a distance from centers, but I then said, well, actually, we do it from mean sea level because, of course, that allows for the oblateness of the Earth and equipotential surfaces. So I did say that was
it's a much easier way to explain it. It was just
exactly.
Just
but I did qualify, and I did actually say that in fact, in practice, you have to use from the mean sea level or some other means because of the oblateness of the Earth, and you have other local variations. I mean. So it's a valid point you're making. Good.
But vertical actually changes a little bit too, based off of masses in the area. But I was actually more upset about the 1 inch thing. So.
Yes, I mean, for instance, the things like if you want to measure equal potential, I believe there's currently in hand some sort of survey of the US in which they are trying to get the geoid levels to make it equipotential, which means that then it's much more complicated. What elevation is, because as you say, it's the equipotential surface. And if you have a big mountain, something like Mount Everest, which will actually, if you had Mount Everest surrounded by water, that would effectively increase, the water would actually be dragged up, and you would effectively, the equipotential surface would actually rise up near Mount Everest. And so actually you would have water going slightly higher there than it would be some distance away from Everest. So as you said, some complications.
And that's also something else which is compensated for by using your regular leveling instrumentation, because it is normal to the geoid. So when you build an orthometric constant elevation using orthometric instruments, guess what? One more thing that's compensated for. Now, GPS equipment does not see that, and therefore you have to use these modeling equations, which, okay, the affine transformations, all been there, done that, right? Everybody? Can I get a show of hands?
That sounds very complicated. How on earth can you make transformations unless you know what the geoid is doing? How can you do that mathematically?
Well, mathematically you cannot. You need a database. You need a database of geoid height values, which fortunately the National Geodetic Survey has gone through great efforts of reaching out to the citizen surveyor, and there's hundreds of thousands of benchmarks determined by orthometric methods, and they're asking surveyors to put your GPS equipment on there in your spare time and send them the data, and they're enhancing the model. And they've got it broken into like 10-kilometer grids and 5-kilometer grids. And even the company I work for, we did work for NOAA, flying with Lacoste-Romberg gravimeters airborne and mapping the acceleration of gravity as an aerial map. And it all goes into coming up with, the big Helmert transformations and all the very, very subtle and complicated stuff. And even in my neighborhood here, the deflection of prime vertical is kind of static, but I was doing something with azimuths, and I'm getting everything's all dozens of points, measurements all working out. And I went about 3 miles down the road, and it went to shit. And I couldn't figure it out. And I looked up the deflection of prime vertical in a scant 3 miles, had 20 arc seconds of change.
Bloody
yeah,
hell.
there's like a geological rift right just south of my town here. And I had another location a few miles out, and I could never get azimuth to work until I realized or started to incorporate the deflections of prime verticals. And then it came right in because you have geodetic coordinates, you have astronomic coordinates.
Wow.
And astronomic coordinates are based on orthometric, in other words, your local down.
Right. So in fact, this thing I was talking about, this thing I'd heard about the US doing this, this clearly, I think this is the same thing. They're trying to find the equipotential surface, which doesn't, wiggling around can be dependent on the rock deposits. If it's a bit dense around there, then it's going to, as I was saying with Everest, pull it up a bit. So in other words, if you had the area with water flow, what, in other words, would be the shape of a body of water, which would show the equipotential surface? Where would that be? Would it match the elevation you would get from...
Without a doubt, sea surface topology is an entire science. And a body of water that's only, like Lake Mead, right? The water level from shore to shore is not parallel to the arc of the ellipsoid. We know this, and it is modeled, and you can access it in the database, and you can see it when you mix orthometric equipment, analog survey equipment, and GPS equipment. You do get those distinct differences.
They also have a lot of anomalies in the Bolivian salt flats, conforming with geodesy.
Mountains are a bitch. Mountains are a bitch. I go in the Appalachians and I can see 20 arc seconds come right at me, and I go out into the floodplain of the Shenandoah, and it's quite homogeneous.
And the trouble is, of course, if you're dealing with a large body of water, then you get winds and tides and other effects that screw you up. So you can't even rely on water. So when we talk about the equipotential surface, you can't just say this is where the water is, because immediately you get out into oceans and you've got tides and other sorts of crap that screws you up. And that's why you were saying you need to use a gravitometer to do it, or gravimeter, because the bodies of water, unless they're unless they're not being affected by wind, tides, or flow of some sort, you can't rely on even water telling you where the bloody equipotential surface is, because it's being affected by loads of other stuff.
Yeah, and the mistake that the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey made, 140 years ago, was they assumed that the elevation of sea level in Maine and the elevation of sea level in Florida was the same.
Really?
And now we see.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, no, in 1900, okay, 1900, all right. And then when they ran orthometric levels from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, they also treated them as being at the same sea level because there was no technology to tell them different. And they found, there's a couple of meters different from Pacific Ocean, like, somewhere around San Francisco to somewhere around Boston. It was every reason they had no option. There was no technology to tell them how different they were. And so that's why we went from NGBD 29 to NABD 88. It took them 100 years to get rid of it.
Right. Yeah, they've got a bit of a problem. So something like the water level in the UK, and then you go over to the water level, as you say, on the east coast of the US. Well, the only option you've got really is to say they're the same. But I mean, you could presumably, unless you can, because you can't really measure between the two. You've got a problem there, haven't you? Have to work out the elevations the same. Yeah.
I have a thought and a question.
But I misspoke. Actually, their elevations are the same, but their height above ellipsoid is not. And so, if you start from the East Coast and you go to the West Coast, you will not hit zero by the time you get there.
Well, I'm a bit confused. What the elevations are different, surely, because as I say, if you have tides and things affecting you,
it's complicated, and it's a matter of where's your point of reference. Right. So
I mean, equipotential, I think, as you said earlier, I think using a gravimeter, that's going to tell you where the equipotential surface is, but that's not necessarily going to be reflected in the water level because you've got tides and you've got water flows and rivers and things all affecting stuff and streams and God knows what. That's going to screw. So, in other words, the water level is not an absolutely reliable source of telling you what the elevation is because there's all sorts of other effects going on.
oh no, if you're building a gravity flow water system, yeah, it's exactly perfect.
Yes, if you can get away from tides and water flow, and if you're building a drain, then yes, it is going to match the equipotential surface.
Yeah, and if you're building a very shallow grade long railroad track going into the Rockies, yeah, you don't care about anything but what a water level or an orthometric level is going to tell you for potential.
Yeah, so if you could build a canal, for instance, if we could have built a canal from the UK to the US, then you would know that when it arrived in the US, that it was at the same equipotential level because there's not wind. You can avoid effects of wind and tides and Gulf Stream and God knows what else.
Flow. There would be no flow.
Yeah, and so once you've got no flow, you then know it's equipotential. But unfortunately, the oceans are affected by other things besides gravity.
Right. So long-term tide gauge monitoring involves, like years of observation and a whole lot of statistics. Now, what's occurring now is over years of observation, it's dynamic. So you can't make a long-term average with the same confidence that you think you have because you made 5 years of observations, but in those 5 years, sea levels change a centimeter.
Can I ask a couple of questions, please?
Go ahead.
One, isn't the amount of water inland going to affect this survey? That if you're in the middle of a drought and then we have phenomenal rain and it refills the Colorado River and Lake Mead and so on, isn't that actually going to affect the shape of the equipotential surface?
There are dynamics to the geoid, particularly like the Three Gorges Dam. Yeah, that's sequestering enough water to change things. The drying out of an aquifer, that would be at the highest of science to pick off the tiniest bits. Because water isn't all that dense. You got all the Moxa mountains, which are static.
Right. The other thought was, because of Earth's rotation and indeed probably also the unevenness of mass distribution, if you actually precisely map out an equipotential surface from an arbitrary reference point somewhere on a mountainside, and then you go 100 meters up from that arbitrary reference point and map out another equipotential surface, by the time you've gone all the way across the USA, are those two equipotential surfaces actually still 100 meters apart? Or would the distance between them change because each of them is its own shape of ellipsoid?
Yeah.
Well, you'd have there's a lot of topology in between them. So it's a roller coaster. It would be a continuous chain of elevations, and that's why you would have to take into a different reference. But as for what you were saying about the droughts, is in the Great Plains, there's what they call glacial rebound, where the elevations are in some places they still are creeping up from the decline of the half-mile thick ice.
Yeah, actually, you would get different if you had an equipotential surface as 100 meters apart in place A, and then at place B, you had a really dense piece of rock, and then a big gap. You could actually change the distance between the equipotential surfaces vertically.
Right, and if you took your orthometric tools and made your nice little survey leveling line between them, you wouldn't find a whole lot of problem. But yeah, because you're going over hills and valleys of the geoid.
Right. So if I start somewhere in North Dakota and I survey my way south through the Great Plains all the way down to New Orleans. And someone else surveys his way west to the Rockies and down the Rockies, and I work my way from New Orleans west to the Rockies. When we arrive, are we going to have a disagreement about how far apart we are? Because let's say this guy has started off down the Rockies and has water leveled his way down and drawn a contour line the whole way down, starting from a point that was 2 kilometers above where I started. I've surveyed my way down the Mississippi River or the Missouri or whatever I can find at a much lower altitude. Are those two altitudes actually curving at different rates due to Earth rotation? Because he's farther out. His linear velocity is greater. The centrifugal lightening of the water that he's using is greater.
Well, if you
you
say
make
that,
a chain, yeah. But
Go
again, if you make a chain of measurements between those two using orthometric equipment to get between them, that's one thing. But if you're going to do it in like one single measurement, of course that'd be different. But by making that chain of, short incremental measurements.
if you define the distance from the center of Earth as actually the gravimetric potential, in other words, the potential you've got relative to the center of the Earth, and then you define a surface. So if that's the method you were using to determine what is the distance from your elevation, then obviously you are going to agree. If you take this gravimeter to wherever it was you're saying north of the Rockies and you came down, you'd obviously agree that the gravimeter would agree on the same thing when you got there. But obviously you would, in terms of actual distance from the center of the Earth or distance from mean sea level, you would vary differently. But the gravimeter way that Larry was talking about initially, if you agreed on that, then you are going to agree on everything, because there's going to be a particular value for every point on the Earth, which is going to be defined what is effectively your elevation, even if it is sometimes closer to the center of the Earth than somewhere else. That surface is going to move its distance from the center of the Earth, and it's obviously going to have an incredibly complicated shape, because if you go past a mountain, then it will go down, and if you go past a very less dense area, perhaps water or something, then it'll go up. And so the distance from the center of the Earth will vary like crazy. Well, like crazy, measurably different. But if you use that as your measure of what elevation means, the equipotential, how much the force of gravity is at a particular point, is your elevation, then you will always agree. But you obviously be different. Your distance from the center of the Earth will vary as you move around on the surface of your equipotential surface.
I think everybody's seen the little diagrams of the color-coded, potato-shaped, lopsided Earth. That's basically a gravitational map of Earth that actually shows the equal gravitational potential. That was taken by satellites, measuring the distance between the satellites using interferometers. And the satellites would speed up and slow down based off of the gravity in the area, the acceleration of gravity in the area. Measuring it like that or measuring from that type of height will average an area of the surface. Let's say it'll average a 50-mile diameter area of the surface per measurement, per pixel, per se. And it would you would have this upper scale measurement. Now, if you take something like an airplane that's flying much lower, you'll get a higher resolution of that data, of the where you'll be able to pick up much smaller variations in the gravity. And then if you bring it back down to the surface, you'll get extremely high resolution data where you'll get even more variations of smaller objects that you'll see. You'll see small changes due to smaller subsurface anomalies under the surface. So the elevation that you actually take your measurements from will change the resolution of the measurements also, on top of the other things of the angle changes and stuff.
And in the chat, I posted a piece of a data sheet from a surveyed point by the National Geodetic, and you see orthometric height and dynamic height and the gravity. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but the difference between dynamic height and orthometric height in this case is like 14 centimeters.
And that diagram,
and other points in the neighborhood are going to be, you know, not that much different in that dynamic height difference. But yeah, you can go up on a mountain ridge, and yeah, you could end up with some differences. So you're dealing with potential, and it's complicated. Okay, it's complicated, and you're down into this. You're dealing with centimeters, not tens of meters.
yeah, because that potato thing you were talking about, IB, that we've seen, I could get it, but people have made actually saying a potato-shaped thing which shows color-coded differences of blue and red of how much it is above or below, but it's above or below the reference ellipsoid.
Right.
So that we've got a reference ellipsoid, and then we say how much above or below that it is the actual real equipotential surface is above or below that. So it's not obvious that that's what it's doing.
Well, that's what the geoid is. It's a deviation from the ellipsoid.
Which is also on that data sheet is the geoid height. There's distance from the geoid to the ellipsoid.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you look at your GPS data, there's a string that normally comes out. It's a GPGGA string. They'll actually show in the string your ellipsoid geoid separation within the string, based off of your location.
And it pulled that from database.
Yeah, that's a database driven thing.
Right.
Yeah, the GPS didn't just get that difference on its own.
No. Yeah, that's based off of your location as a lookup table in a database. But the height it gives or the elevation that it gives is some of them will say it's MSL, but it's a geoid based elevation.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on if you're dealing with new or old equipment. Yeah,
yeah.
And I thought they did something with the CA code for handheld GPS receivers, which I was totally unaware of. But I have a 1995 Trimble handheld, and the elevation it returned was ellipsoid height. And so I'm at the airport, and I would see that, you know, that 32-meter difference. And then all of a sudden, it started returning orthometric elevations. So they changed something in the message in the CA code to compensate for that. And so, yeah, now my 1995 handheld returns sea level elevation.
Amusingly, that potato-shaped thing, which shows you the difference between what the geoid is over and relative to the ellipsoid, the reference ellipsoid, on the moon, the variation is much greater. And IB was describing how they use satellites to determine what the gravitational potential is at any one point on the surface. On the moon, they were having terrible problems with satellites going off track. And then it turned out that it's because the moon is incredibly variable in its density. And so the orbits were being wiggled around by the changing density of the moon. And there are some particularly tricky points where they have to allow for all this to keep their bloody satellites going around the moon. Up to that point, they actually crashed a couple because they didn't realize.
Yeah, it's that asymmetric density of the moon, which is why it's tidal locked.
Well, it'd be tidal locked even if it was uniform.
No.
Well, it would be. I mean, because it's okay. If it was a perfect sphere of uniform density, then it would not be tidally locked. But thing rock is not. But it's being pulled towards the Earth. I mean, it's not. I mean, you're implying. Even if you had something that was uniformly dense but was stretchable, the rock on even the Earth moves up and down, I think, by a meter due to the moon. So if it can stretch at all, then it will become tidally locked, even if it was of uniform density. The lack of uniform.
If it only if it has two lines of symmetry, instead of one, without doubt, it was not. Tidal locking occurs over time and deforms the body as well.
Yeah, but the problems they've got is not just the fact that it's slightly bulging towards the Earth. It's actually not uniformly dense, and it's actually all sorts of points on it have different gravitational potentials, and that was screwing up the orbits. So there are two issues here, I think.
Yeah, and when even with the very first satellites, that's when they were beginning to map the difference in geoid and ellipsoid, very carefully, because satellites, they could get so much data by tracking their true orbit as opposed to their mathematical orbit.
Yeah, it's amazing that the satellites can do this. To think they're as IB was saying, they can sort of peek down and say, "Oh, this point 50 miles square has got a different gravitational thing than this one." It's just an incredible.
And then we have to deal with land tides. The Earth crust, land tides is a hard to measure phenomenon, but with satellite data and the amount of data collected, land tides are now part of that equation.
Actually, some GPSs can actually measure land tides real time as long as they don't have a local differential source. If you correct for ionospheric troposphere with dual frequency, and then you actually correct for time and orbital correctors with a wide baseline, you could actually measure land tides real time.
So when we talk about land tides, we're talking about the thing I described a minute or so ago, which is that the Earth is moving in and out, the land is moving in and out as the moon goes over it. That's what you mean by land tides.
It rises and falls with the tides.
Right.
I think it's about 10 centimeters or so.
Yeah,
we're liquid center.
Yeah, but it's a stretchy rock. I mean, the rock of the Earth is actually stretchable. It wouldn't matter if the center was liquid and it was absolutely rigid on the outside. It wouldn't happen. But the point is the outside can move and it's not completely rigid as well.
Right. Yeah, it's called hydrostatic equilibrium. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, of course, it was that Newton decided that the Earth must be oblate, and of course it's what we've discussed before, Larry, that amazing survey of, was it Peru and Colombia, that the French did in about 1780 or whatever it was, to show that the Earth is bulging in the middle.
Yeah, the oblateness of Earth was predicted because of its rotation, and then it was measured and it was confirmed because there was the prolate argument by Laplace because his measurements weren't all that good and only over Central Europe, and Newton said, no, it's probably doing this. And that's what, put the Academy of Sciences, it was that important. They poured like Apollo grade money into those meridian surveys.
Yeah. I mean, that has to assume, and of course that makes the assumption that the Earth is not completely rigid. You have to have that premise that it is going to be hydrostatically affected, even though it's made out of bloody rock.
Well, yeah, but in Newton's time, oblateness was predicted and observed, but it was not necessarily predicted to be dynamic at the measurable scale until higher technology showed up.
That's true. You could argue that, yes, it could have been that the Earth, as it was in liquid form originally and then became solid, it was in that shape. Yes, you're right. It could have been statically ablate, but yes, so that doesn't. Yeah, okay. So that doesn't prove that its shape proves that it's not dynamic. But yes, as you say, it is. But we know it is dynamic.
Yeah. I read something.
And unless we're doing tectonics, it is static.
Now, I read something fairly recently that they were going to be using, since once the Starlink satellites get fully operational with the version 2 satellites and all, and they have the laser links in between them, they were going to be using those links to actually measure the variation in speed between those satellites to increase the accuracy of the gravitational models, just by using those communication satellites.
Yeah. Satellite Geodesy just got a big boom by having an extra 2,000 satellites in there that are
That's
low.
exactly right. Yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting.
So, okay, sorry, there are 2,000 extra satellites doing what? Sorry,
Well, the way the Starlink works is that they actually are in a very low orbit, and they can actually communicate straight to the ground, but they actually communicate between the satellites, and they're trying to use a laser system to actually telemetry the data between each satellite.
Yeah.
By using those data links between the satellites, they could very accurately measure the distance between them. And
Yep.
as that distance changes, that's usually due to orbital speed changes.
Right.
And they could actually measure that very precisely with these laser links between them.
Right.
And that's generally how there's nothing extra as far as hardware goes to be able to do this type of measurement, because that's just the way the
Right.
satellites are designed to work.
I see. So you're saying this is a different principle from the satellites before. We just had one satellite looking at a bit of ground and then seeing something. Now you've actually got
No.
multiple satellites, and the distance between them then gives you a better way of working out what the hell's going on.
I think the original had 3 satellites, and they were all in, and then it was measuring the distance between those 3.
Oh,
But
was it? Oh, right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I think they
that's
were
how-
using microwave links, actually. So you were kind of
Oh, right.
limited by the resolution of the microwave links.
Oh, right. So the original gravimetric measurements we've been talking about with these potato-shaped coloured thingies was determined by a 3-satellite group that was going over and then measuring how much the difference between them.
I think that was only part of it. There was a lot more than that.
You're talking about WMAP?
Yeah, that was part of it. Yeah. They've incorporated that potato map has incorporated a lot of data. I think some of it was there's gravitational absolute gravitometers all over the place right now, and they actually put new ones up whenever they do gravity surveys and all. But I think part of that was a lot of the stuff in remote locations was primarily due to the satellites.
What's WMAP, Blue?
I'm trying to remember now.
Yes, I haven't heard that one before. Right, okay, I just assumed it was one satellite. Yeah, but I was thinking how the hell they did it. Okay, great. So, yes, that makes more sense then. You've got 3 of them measuring the effects on separation between them. Right, okay, yes, that makes... Yes, I was wondering how they're doing that.
Well, like all things, when they had a couple satellites, they were getting perturbation of their orbits. When they get more satellites, and they're getting greater resolution on that. And now you have satellites interconnected to each other, making laser measurements between them. Now you have more information. But yeah, the International Satellite Laser Ranging Service, yeah, they'll track satellites for you. And yeah, then you're picking off the difference between the actual orbit and predicted orbit, and you're refining and refining and refining, and it's accumulation of data, higher and higher resolution. I mean, the geoid separation a long time ago, 20 years, 30 years ago, yeah, you'd have like a 1-degree grid, and now you're into like 5-minute grids.
You'd have thought you'd have to deal with all sorts of other effects, like, I don't know, interaction with other planets and solar storms coming along and bashing them or something. One set of satellites in one place, and the next time they go there, you might get another solar storm doing something else different. Imagine there's quite a few other variables you've got to deal with, and orientation of other planets and things.
And dealing with high precision GPS, as he was describing, using him in an array of dual frequency equipment, you don't use the ephemeris of the day or the week. You wait for what's called a post ephemeris, which can take 2 or 3 weeks later, and they really tell you where that satellite was, instead of everything being some 8-hour prediction.
Wow.
But that's when you're going from, a part in a trillion to a quarter part in a trillion.
God. Theory, isn't science amazing? And details in this stuff is just, yes, I hadn't. That's just incredible.
And there's some very curious sounding website institutions. One is called CODE, the Center for Orbital Determination in Europe. And I would access their ephemeris for post ephemeris for satellite data, because and you got to wait like 2 weeks to get that.
God, everything is just so complicated. It's just
No, it's not. You can take any level of complication you want. Just specify what you're trying to achieve, and then give me a budget.
Yeah, well,
you want to split the atom? Okay. Or you just want to, have a good 5-foot contour map. You pick.
Yeah, it's just another example of anything you want to know in detail. It just gets really involved. There's nothing simple in this life, it seems, about science, the way the world works. It's all
Well, that's the
very
one thing about surveying is even rather rudimentary application still returns very good results until you start going, traversing multiple counties or entire provinces. That's when that shit starts to show up. But yeah, you can work your, like a citywide network. You don't need to know a lot of it, and you won't be wrong.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with talking with people who don't believe the Earth is flat but think horizontal and level are the same thing. They want to know all the details about general relativity, and they want it in 2 sentences or less.
Yeah.
There's a problem there.
Yeah, they don't understand the basics, and then they suddenly want you to leap to the most complicated thing that we barely understand fully. Yeah, it's typical, isn't it?
Blue, did you see that email I sent you?
I saw it in the inbox, Larry, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
It's short. It's just a little something. Fermilab has a video series, and they were talking about the difference between Newtonian physics and Einsteinian physics. And as we know, some people think that Einstein just blew Newton out of the water, but as we know, unless you're dealing with very great speed or in a gravitation well of high potential, Newtonian, satisfies just fine. So he tried to clarify where's the break point. So he said, okay, if 1% is the threshold, you have to go 11% of the speed of light before Newton starts to decay beyond 1%. At 11% the speed of light, which is like 7 million miles a second or something.
Oh, good Lord.
But it was just kind of nice where he plotted it out and showed the threshold to where they depart. And he came up with 11.5% of C.
I did wonder about that. Where's the reference for that? When you say the speed, I mean, we talk about the Earth going along 64,000 miles an hour around the Earth, and then obviously the Earth is then, the solar system is then doing God knows what around the central galaxy or whatever, around the Milky Way, and then the Milky Way is then rotating. I can't remember what the ultimate, because we can use the cosmic microwave background radiation as a reference. I can't remember what the ultimate velocity of the Earth is. It's something several million miles an hour, I think. And I then get confused about right, and then I get confused about, well, does that mean to say we're in relativistic territory? And of course, there is no definite reference. So this is where I get a bit confused. I must admit, I haven't really thought about this properly. What relative to what? Yeah, okay. So
Exactly, because relative to the Milky Way or the Milky Way relative to some other location. Yeah, all motion is relative. So
Indeed.
If we just confine ourselves to our little solar system here, Einstein barely shows up.
Yes, of course, it's the relative. Yes, so it's only in the relative to something else we're doing. Yes, I mean, this is the point about if you are if you were to go out at the speed of light from a car that was moving along at the speed of light, the physics all works because your relative speed to the the car is still going to work. It's not you're going to be compressed by the Lorentz contraction, such that it all still works.
And GPS satellites have relativistic effects that have to be accounted for, otherwise it wouldn't work.
Indeed, they've got two relativistic effects to deal with. They've got to deal with the general relativity and the fact they're near this dirty, great big lump of mass called the Earth, and the fact they're further out from it, just as you at the top of the Eiffel Tower, time's going a bit more quickly than at the bottom. And then, of course, it's also doing it. And they're also doing 17,000 odd miles an hour, which also gives you a special relativity effect.
Yeah, they're moving along at a pretty fast speed, and they're in a pretty shallow piece of gravity well because they're 22,000 kilometers out. So yeah, those nanoseconds will bite you in the ass.
Yeah, and they do actually slightly cancel one another out to some degree. The fact that you're going up higher away from the Earth means the time goes a little bit faster, but the fact you're going fast at 17,000 miles an hour means that you are slowing it down again. So these two factors are actually fighting against one another, and I can't remember which one is the dominant. So,
Newsflash: at those higher orbits, you're going slower.
Yeah.
The GPS satellites book along at about 8,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, if you want to go higher, you got to go slower.
Oh,
That's
GPS,
cool.
oh, right,
Then, if I wanted to go like after Jupiter, all I have to do is go 1 mile an hour.
Yeah, so I was thinking of the
220
Starlink
kilometers
here.
per second. I looked it up. Our speed around the Milky Way, 220 kilometers per second. If anybody would like to work out, to look up however many light years we are from the center of it and work out what that works out to in terms of angular velocity, or even better, centrifugal force, how much your weight should change over the course of a year because you're getting closer to and further away from the center of the Milky Way. Do let us know how many decimal points you need to go to find a significant figure, won't you?
Yeah, the great thing about going around the Milky Way is you're almost going in a straight line. So, for instance, the effect on the Earth of being on the Earth and going around the Sun, our orbit is almost like a straight line. So that's why we don't have the gravitational effects of the Earth rotating are much more important than the effects of going around the Sun, because. And going around the Milky Way, the line is because acceleration means a change in your velocity, whether it's direction or magnitude. And obviously, our magnitude going around the Milky Way is not changing. The tangential velocity is not changing, but the direction is. But the direction is so much like a straight line that it's almost no acceleration at all. Yeah. But yes, so I'm absolutely right about the GPS satellites. There, yes, if you're talking about GPS satellites, I wasn't. I was referring to the low orbit ones. Then yes, they are going around more slowly. As you say, the lower you go down, the lower orbit satellites have to go that much faster than the I think it's the square root or something of the distance, isn't it? The change in velocity. So yeah, so the lower satellites are going around more quickly and therefore more. So I was thinking something like the ISS, for instance, and the one we were talking about GPS. Those are quite low, and they're not like the stationary ones, which are very high, 24,000 miles odd away. The GPS ones are quite low, so they are having to go quite swiftly, and so they are affected more by they are doing well, I don't know what's the ISS is doing. Was it 17,000 miles an hour? I don't know. Where are the GPS satellites in relative to the ISS? They presume they're a little bit above it.
Yeah, they're quite a ways above it.
Yeah, but twice
GPS
as far.
satellites are orbiting at about 2 revolutions a day, something like that.
Yeah,
I think their orbital period is around 12 hours.
Right, that is quite.
Two times sidereal day, I think.
Yeah, precisely in 12 hours, but it's 12 hours sidereal.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, that is quite a lot more, actually, isn't it? Because the ISS does it. Was it once every? Is it every 90 minutes that goes around the Earth?
Yeah, about that.
So
a little over 20. Let's see, it's a little over 20,000 kilometers.
That's GPS. Yeah, 22,000.
Right, and geostationary is 24,000 miles, isn't it?
It's about twice that. Think about it.
Yeah.
12-hour period to a 24-hour period.
Yeah, right. Okay, if you accept the 12-hour, yeah, okay, yeah. Right. Yeah, so it's quite a bit higher than
twice
ISS, okay.
because it's R cubed. If you're doing the angular velocity.
Yes, it's the square root, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's a square root of a cube or a cube root of the square, depending which way you're doubling.
So it's not linear. Yeah, you can't. Yes, it's not a linear thing. So in other words, you go twice as high. So for instance, just the orbiting of the planet, something like Uranus or something, which is a factor of whatever it is, it's not linearly going by that much slower. It's the square, as you say, of the square root of the cube or something. Yeah, absolutely right. It's not straightforward. I think it might be just a square root. I think it's actually just a square root of the distance difference in height. Yeah, so it's not linear anyway. So yes, you can't make that saying it's twice as high. Therefore, it's going to take half the time.
And you have to be a little bit guarded to when you hear about the height of a orbiting satellite. Is that from the center of the Earth or the surface of the Earth?
It's always the center they talk about. Yeah, yes. Obviously, all the orbital mechanics is from the center. And I think when we talk about, okay, you're right. Whether colloquially, whether we talk about it being 20, yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the ISS at 230-mile orbit.
Yes.
Altitude.
Yes, indeed. So actually, the percentage difference might be So the you said it was someone saying it was how the height that orbit of the GPS was that was that above the center of the Earth or center of the Earth?
Can't recall.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Larry. Yeah, that is a very important point.
Well, centrifugal acceleration is omega squared r, right? But gravitational attraction is the inverse of r squared. So
yeah. But
and those 2 points
you know a lot about, which is something you know a lot about. You poured an investigation into that Cavendish, which is so impressive.
Mark Tin has posted it. It's proportional to the cube, as I think Dog was saying, the cube, the square root of the cube. The period, that's the period. But I think the velocity, I thought, was just the square root of the. Oh damn! I can't remember. I have to go and work it out. I thought it was just the square root of r. But the period is obviously the is the cube, the square root of the cube. But I thought the velocity was the square root. Oh, I have to go and look it up. But anyway, so the point is there are two relativistic effects on these satellites. Oh, here some dog has put it there.
Posted a link to a picture in Wikipedia which will make everything clear and answer all your questions.
Yes, indeed, yes.
See.
Yeah.
This thing.
The thing that says gravitation, I'm done, I think.
There we go. So indeed, as linear velocity, yes, as the Dog just posted, it is the square root of 1/r, I think. There's the velocity proportional to r. But the period was, as you said, the cube of the. That's the period, but obviously it's got further to travel, so it's not the velocity is actually doesn't follow that same relationship.
Yeah, you look at the GPS satellites doing 8,000 miles an hour, ISS doing 17,000 miles an hour, and the moon is doing 2,200.
Right.
Correct. Like we said, if you want to go higher, you got to go slower.
Yeah. Just as Mercury is going much more quickly than, say, Pluto,
right,
around the sun.
Yeah, Mercury's whizzing around the sun, and Pluto takes 200 and something years.
Yeah, and it's not just the fact that it's got further to go; it's actually going more slowly as well.
Going very slow
by this square root thing I was talking about. So it's the square root of the radius is the difference. Is proportional to.
Yep. All right, this has been fun. You guys had fun?
We did. I enjoyed that. Yeah. Sorry for monopolising that. So many people are going to be complaining again. I've been talking too much. Sorry about that. Okay. Sorry. You'll have to shut me up, Blue, if I'm overdoing it.
Nah, you're fine.
Oh, thanks, Blue. That's reassuring.
You're doing fine.
Oh, thanks.
Makes my job easy. All I have to do is
He's
listen.
a nerd. Rumpus is a nerd.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I know there's one guy who hates me speaking at all on your channel. Is it Astro Rex or something? Every time he moans I'm talking at all.
Rumpus stands for Rumpus tends to forget that he's not the only one in the room.
Sorry, George. I do shut up if I'm told.
Yes, he does.
Shut up.
Oh, that's questionable. That
sometimes.
holds maybe for a microsecond.
If I get excitable, I must admit I don't shut up very quickly. But
Yeah, but you're always excitable.
oh, okay, all right then.
At least you're not as bad as that Peck guy. I mean, everybody's constantly having to tell him to STFU.
I like Brian. I think he's great. Very, very polite, is Brian. And he was still threatening to come over for the rec test, actually. He was saying he might come over. Well, presumably he's happened. That's right. He was coming over to the UK in the spring. So presumably he's been over here, actually. So presumably he's missed out. Yeah.
But what's the rec test? Someone asked me yesterday. I didn't know.
Oh, that was me. That's my Bedford levels test. It's rect, as in
okay.
Rumpus Earth curvature test. That's the thing that I've been going on about for a year. And unfortunately, I've been hoping to get onto it a bit. I haven't. It's been delayed by a bit, and the fact that George is a bit poorly at the moment isn't helping either. In time to because George wanted to join in. So, but yes, it's been delayed a little bit. I will be back on that shortly. But it's been a few delays thanks to a bit of life on my part. But it's still happening, and hopefully within a month it will be sorted. I'll be releasing some videos on it, detailing all in excruciating detail.
Did you check really if your equipment is still there?
Say again.
Did you check your equipment is still there?
I haven't. I've in the process. I'm in the process of checking it all. Yes. I mean, so Alan, for instance, I've got Alan who said he would come along and have a look at what's going on the day as well. So I've got quite a few people to organise, and I've got a load of other helpers. I'm hoping to get about possibly up to 15 or so helpers, and if I get people like Alan along there as well, and so several more flatties want to come along, and oh my god, it's going to turn into oh dear.
Everybody,
please
please
also thinking of trying to
support
get
Blue
involved.
Marble
There's some television.
Science.
There's a
He's
program.
going to be
There's
having to
breakfast television
explain
program
how science says there's no horizontal planes.
Mark Sargent appeared on, and a couple of other flatties, and there's a guy called Philip Schofield on there saying, "What are you talking about?" But he invited them on repeatedly, so they've got quite an interest in this flat Earth thing. So I was going to try and get them to come along and potentially do. I haven't contacted them yet, but I will do, and they seem to be interested in it. They seem to be interested in flatties saying it, so I'm sure they'll be interested in some globe tests, which they can come along and actually look through some telescopes and things and say, "Oh, look, this shows that the Earth is a globe." So I think they would be interested in that because it's a visual thing. So it could get out of hand.
Yeah, Rumpus. I think the word you're looking for is circus.
Right. Yeah. I think
That's what it's going to turn into.
Yeah.
A damn circus.
Well, Alan, I'll need you there then. I'll need you there then to exert some discipline over it all then.
Well, there comes a limit to which you can no longer control the crowd.
Yeah, well, yeah, indeed. So it could get out of hand. And Bev, of course, is threatening to bring along. I mean, he brought along about 10 people last time when he thought I was there, and he's threatened to come along there and do his little water level test, which we've been going through in this thing at the same time, as well as wanting to look at the equipment. And I've got one flatty from his group called Blood's Thicker who wants to bring my son as well, and then I've got Brian Mabbitt and the 2 or 3 others are saying they want to make the trip to do it as well. So God knows how many. This could be a flatty.
You should appeal to Bev sensibilities and saying, "Hey, look, Bev, you don't need to do your water level test on the same day I'm doing my test. Come on, let's be reasonable."
Oh well, he wants to be there while I'm there. I mean, that's the point. He wants to do both. He wants to be there while the test is our test is there, the Rex thing's going on, and he then wants to do his test on the same day.
I think it's a big mistake. It's your show.
What test is going to do? The same test he already did?
Yeah, and the one that we've just been talking about, the one with the multiple water levels, and he's going to got these, these what's it called, straight line segment, shared straight line segment, and of course it's flawed. It's not a straight line. There is no shared straight line. They're not straight lines, mate.
And he's going to do it next to a what?
Canal.
Canal.
Big whopping canal full of water. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
I hope he wears 2 pairs of socks at the same time too.
Yeah, one that we've just been talking about, the one with the multiple water levels. Someone's echoing. Straight. Yeah, so he's deliberately coming there. He wants to be there to do the test and to be there and witness it live as well. God,
he should also compare he should also compare his levels to the canal to see if they agree with each other. Or they're
Yeah, that's
different.
the amazing thing, isn't it?
He's
He's got this, as Boo says, he's got this water level thing called the canal, and then he's bringing along a water level. And this is the problem that Sly had with his test. Sly got all those tubes and things next to this dirty, great big canal. I was thinking when we spoke to him, Sly, there's this water level thing next to you. You're trying. You shouldn't you be using that? And his bug two test is actually going to use the water in the water level in the canal rather than him trying to manufacture one in some tubes, which then leak.
But the thing is, though, we all know that Bev is not competent enough to do any comparisons. And the thing is, the only purpose he's going to serve there is to be a disruptive entity. I mean, can you imagine him asking any relevant question?
No, but I mean, he's not aggressive. I mean, when I was there, he didn't try and do anything aggressive. He didn't try and do anything. I mean, he said he wasn't. And the person, this Blood Thicker guy who was with them, he said that nobody was trying to be disruptive in that then, and they weren't intending to be. I think Bev actually does want to. I don't think he wants to be aggressively disruptive, although he's obviously, I regard him as an obnoxious lying wanker. I don't think he is I don't think he would aggressively interfere with it. It seems, and that's.
No, he just wants to be there as a distraction. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey guys, Rex here.
Just a distraction. So
has Bev actually done this test?
Yes, he's done. Yes, he's already done once. Yeah, a year ago, he did this thing, and he's threatening to do it again at Bedford levels, but
not competently.
Well, why on earth
does it
would he
over
do this
such
test and not sight along the tops of the or some measurement along the top? Why would he overlook that, having gone through the trials of even doing the test? Why would he leave that crucial aspect out?
Because he doesn't want to find that out. We pointed this out to him a couple of years ago. I pointed this out, and people have been pointing out.
Why do the test otherwise? Why on earth even bother?
It's Bev. It's Bev. He doesn't care.
God Almighty! But what else would be the point of doing the test? What other observation would you include?
Well,
other than that one.
His explanation now, Rex, is that he doesn't need to do that test because he has a geometric proof that tells him what the result will be. So there's no sense in doing the measurement.
Oh, for the love! And the flatties buy that.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, he says it all the time. Whenever when you say to him, "Why don't you test?" Our contention is that these risers are not in a line. So your claim to be doing a Euclid test is invalid because they're not in a line. And he says, I don't need to check they're in a line because I've got a geometric proof that they're in a line. And he refuses. And I can only presume, well, I don't know. He's either thinks he might get the wrong answer because he's seen things like drop happening and he can't explain it, or he's basically lying. He knows that they're not going to form a line and he's lying to everybody. But I don't know which it is. Blue is obviously in these lying department. I think he's in the... He just thinks he's just an idiot. And so
I'm in the line. I'm with Blue.
No, he's lying about it. He knows what it's going to do.
He knows exactly why he's leaving. He's omitting it.
Absolutely. You know, science is not afraid of measurements. We're not afraid to find out what the real answer is. We want to know what really is, not what we think it ought to be.
But he has a geometric proof that trumps science.
That would be the way he thinks, but that's not the way. That's not the way it works.
Yeah, but if you've gone to the trouble of setting up this entire apparatus, and why would you not take every observation possible while you've got it set up?
Because you're a flatty. You don't need
to.
I don't think it's his position now. Its position now is that science tells us that water level is a tool that to create a horizontal
well, then why do the test at all?
Plane of reference. And I don't need to check it because main science says so.
And if you don't need to check it, why are you doing it? What is the purpose?
It's weird, isn't it? I mean,
to show level is horizontal.
Yeah, we've talked about the Bedford level test forever with the flatties, right? And they know the exact purpose of it, and that is to measure along, a certain sight line. They know that. Why are they buying BEVs in? Why are they suddenly conveniently forgetting that entire history of conversation we've had with them, and going with BEV's analysis? Suddenly forgetting.
Bev is now the spokesman. He is the guru. They all, fall in line with Bev. I mean, it puzzles me, Rex. It's beyond me how Bev has risen as the top turd to flow in the bowl.
Well, QE and Oakley are just as bad. I mean, Oakley's going to be taking just as much interest in trying to slag this off as much as Bev is.
Let's determine his orbital period around the drain.
I mean, if you're just anti-science, I mean, let's not forget, Bev doesn't understand maths. He doesn't understand what a radian is. He didn't know what a great circle was until I pointed out to him 2 months ago. There's some amazing. I think Blue did a video on him not understanding what a radian was. He doesn't understand basic geometry. He doesn't understand trigonometry. He doesn't know what an arc trigonometric function is. He didn't think you could determine the angle of something from a right-angled triangle about a year ago. I don't know whether he's changed his mind now. He doesn't think you can have an angle to a curve. I mean, there's so much he doesn't understand. So in this confusing world, I think this is what it turns out to be. If you're confused by reality, you don't understand what the hell's going on, you're just going to go with what you want to believe in. So if someone comes up with a mathematical proof of something or a physics explanation of something, you don't understand it. What are you going to do? You're just going to go with what you want to believe. And he wants to believe that level's horizontal. He wants to believe that, in effect, that the world is flat. And if you don't understand the counter-arguments, you don't understand that down is towards the centre of the Earth, well, then you don't understand what a radian is, well, you just go with what you want to believe. And that's what these flat are too stupid, except for the cynical ones. I mean, the Oakleys of this world might possibly have, I think, we understand what's going on, but I think most of them just are just too stupid.
MC Toon had a funny line where he was discussing something with a flip regarding arc minutes and things like that. He didn't understand what was going on. And MC Toon says,
Brian's logic.
He goes, I believe he prefers radians.
Yeah, Brian's logic. I mean, for instance, Brian's logic got this idea that minutes of arc are, what is it? He explains it in the observation of Polaris and things, and the what's it? I can't remember what he thinks it's something else.
Degree.
Yeah, yeah. MC2
and
says,
Riley thought minutes were actually time.
I see the
right now where I live, it's 12 minutes of hour past 7.
This is it. Bev, I think about a month ago, described longitude as a time. He didn't know it was an angle. I mean, this is what we're dealing with, these people. You see, so this is why you see Blue. I believe he's just stupid. If you were intelligent, you would know that longitude was an angle, and you wouldn't go. So, and he didn't know what invariable was the other day. It was at yesterday's program, yesterday's hangout. He was asked, "What the hell does invariably mean?" The guy's an idiot. And so, if you're an idiot, you go along with what you want to believe.
But to be fair, longitude is time. So let there be no doubt. Longitude is time.
Well, it can be used in time. We define longitude in terms of degrees, but you can obviously, it does reflect time as well. But the point is, it is actually an angle. It's defined as, in terms of the planet, it is an angle.
Okay, and that's how you measure longitude. You don't measure longitude with angles. You measure longitude with time.
Correct, but that still makes longitude an angle.
But if the only unit of measure to measure it, I'm just saying, I'll forgive him that one because longitude really is time, in my opinion, in my book, as I use it.
Yeah, but if you want to put it down on a diagram, you put it as an angle, and he didn't understand that. It didn't occur to him that it was an angle on the spherical Earth because he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand what down is, as far as it seems. He thinks down is going down the screen of a monitor. Oh, if you ever turned a paper 90 degrees on him, he'd get all totally confused.
I think you've made a false assumption somewhere, Rumpus. I think you've assumed that he can't be both too stupid to understand this and lying about it.
No, I did. In fact, I
did.
make the point to everybody that it is in fact both. I regularly say it's either one or the other or both. In fact, I go for both. So we know that he deceives, we know he lies, and we also know he's stupid. So the question is, at any one moment, what the subject is talking about, is he lying about it or is he too stupid about it? So for any particular subject,
even
he's
about one
discussing.
subject, it can be both. He can be
Yes, I
able
was.
to understand the debunk that someone is trying to present, and know that it is a debunk, and be very busy trying to prevent it being presented or prevent people understand it because he's being dishonest as well as too stupid to understand it.
I think if you're on one subject, can you be lying about something if you don't understand it? If you don't understand it, then you can't be lying. You can only be lying about it if you understand it. I think.
You could
Well,
lie
you could be
about it.
claiming to understand it. That would be a lie.
Yes. Well, no, lying. Remember, a lie is to say you are saying something that's untrue and you know it to be untrue. And if you don't understand something but you think you understand, that's not a lie. If I say, if he says I understand something like general relativity, he's not lying. He may honestly believe that he does. Though, of course, he could also be lying as well, and he could know that he doesn't understand it. But then you need to know what's going on inside his head, because a lie is an intention where you know what you're saying is untrue. And the question is, does he know what he's saying is untrue in various circumstances? We know, for instance, when he said to ICST that he'd never seen a model of the Earth with spherical oceans. We know that has to be a lie, because we know that he cannot possibly, if he's got a normal human being, not seen pictures of the Earth with water on it. So there's a case where we know he's lying.
Let's just tick all the boxes and be done with it.
He could know that gunpowder is involved in how an AK-47 works, but not know how an AK-47 works, and say that gunpowder doesn't actually contribute anything to the function of the AK-47. He would then be lying without knowing what he's talking about.
Well, he would then... I think he could know that if he knew that how gunpowder was, but then you've got to know whether you could say some things don't have guns without gunpowder, and you could then say well, you can have black powder and things and nitrocellulose. So you could argue that some. If he knew, I think if you're on a particular subject, I don't think you can lie about something that you understand. You have to know something. You have to understand it to lie about it. It all depends how granular you get, basically. Whether there's enough, is one part component of it you're talking about there, and then the overall thing. But I think if you're on any one subject if you do genuinely understand it, then you have to genuinely understand something to be able to then lie about it. You can then, otherwise, you can be deluding yourself. You can say I understand something, but not be lying. If you see what I mean. But anyways, there's a philosophical argument. Perhaps we could do a hangout on that, dog, or something.
Also, while I've got you here, George, I blame you personally for the Flatty's entire infatuation with refraction. They never even heard of the word before you started doing your frozen lake top tests. Side rather.
Yes, I
remember that.
Yes, I recognize that the same as you.
It was, and since then they either deny it in the beginning part of their statement and appeal to it in the second part.
Yeah, but in my defense, my test was innocent enough.
You did not know.
I wasn't trying to tie it into the flat Earth, cold Earth, and then Jaron Capanella and Jesse Kozlowski and others got involved, and then so I went ahead and modified the test a bit, and then because it was an easy thing to do to test and measure the curvature of the Earth.
It was actually George's measurement, actually, was it 3 or 4 years ago now, 4 years ago, that set me off on this refraction obsession I've now got, because he was trying to do these measurements, and then he came shocked back to me saying, hold on, I'm getting measurements here I don't understand. And we both knew about refraction and what it did, but we didn't realize the practical effects. I mean, obviously people like Larry, who have to deal with refraction on a day-to-day basis, understood it, but I was aware of it, but I didn't realize it had such an impact on things, and only with George's real world measurements and trying to do this with him that he and I were getting very confused about what the hell was going on, and then realized, oh yes, this refraction thing that we both know about, oh, yeah, actually it has a real world effect. It is something you have to really do. Obviously people like Larry and other people have to deal with it,
but it was more than that. Is my first set of measurements were done like 15 inches off the ice, and the amount of refraction just totally blew our socks off.
Yeah, it was. So George is responsible for me getting involved in refraction as well. Yeah.
Well, I've put out in the chat in the YouTube chat a link to the Discord, and anyone that wants to hop in here and join in with the discussion, please feel free to do so.
That means you, SC Montreal.
But at this point, think we're going to wish YouTube a very pleasant evening, and we'll continue over here in the Discord voice channel if you guys, anybody wants to join. I want to thank everybody for being here. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody that's been here on the panel, so to speak. And unless anybody's got anything else, we'll terminate YouTube and continue here with this enlightening discussion. And I take that as a no. So you guys have a good evening. We'll see you on the next one.